Good afternoon, and welcome to the first ever Jerusalem Post and Khaleej Times conference. It's truly a privilege. When the peace deals were announced a few months ago, we at the Jerusalem Post looked for ways to make our own contribution, to pour some substance into the agreements known as the Abraham Accords. We were so lucky to find a partner in the Khaleej Times, one of the leading media groups in the United Arab Emirates. During the upcoming broadcast, you'll benefit from an insider's tour of the region. We'll hear from officials and experts from Israel, the United Arab Emirates, and the United States. And they'll be talking about how to take these relations and take them to the next level, diplomatically and economically. But to kick us off, I'd like to welcome my colleague and friend, Vinay Kamat, the editor-in-chief of the Khaleej Times. Vinay, it's great to have you with us.
Thank you, Yaakov. And we would like to thank you and your colleagues at the Jerusalem Post for hosting this event, which is so very timely, along with the Khaleej Times. This is a great moment. And to kick off our conversation, I would like to ask you one question. As I see the Jerusalem Post, I see some of your opinion writers have spoken of a domino effect when it comes to peace. Yaakov, do you see a domino effect happening at the people-to-people level, and what would it be?
Well, Vinay, as you know, in our previous conversations, we've spoken about how governments make the peace deals, but it's incumbent and it's on the people like you, like myself, to actually fill those deals with real substance and to give them a future. And I think that that's what we're seeing, and that's how I view the relationship between the Jerusalem Post and the Khaleej Times. I think that this domino effect, as we've all seen what's happened since the announcement of the deal and the normalization between the United Arab Emirates and Israel, has been other countries that have come to the table that are also want to get on this peace train, and they want to be part of this new Middle East that's coming. And that seems to be working to a large extent. But I'm curious also from your perspective, from Dubai, where you're sitting, how does it look from there? What's the sentiment on the street that you and your reporters are picking up on?
It's a coincidence, Yaakov, that yesterday I was watching this movie, Lawrence of Arabia. And one of the questions that the character is asked, Peter O'Toole is asked, is why do you love the desert? And he gives a very interesting answer, which is, I think, can be applied to what's happening. He said that I love the desert because it's clean, it's pure. I think what's happening around is, I think, a coming together of many forces which almost touch the peace dimension. And I think people were prepared for that much before the outcome happened. I think we were looking forward to this natural outcome, and they are reacting to it in many ways. In business, in travel, even in getting together to celebrate. And I think that's a big thing, because I think you are ready much before a peace accord happens. In fact, in people's minds and hearts, a peace accord had already happened. Echo.
No, I think you're 100% right. And I think that that's what this is all about, really, is showing the world that something else and something better is possible, and there's a better future available for our peoples, for our children. And today in the conference, we're really going to be able to hear from the people who are making this possible, from businessmen, from the heads of commerce and industry, both in Israel and the UAE, from government ministers, from United States, American officials who were involved in making this possible. So we're really going to get, like I mentioned before, an insider's tour of the region. Vinay, I want to really thank you for making this possible and for helping us build this collaboration between the Jerusalem Post and the Khaleej Times. And this is going to be a great conference. So thank you very much, Vinay.
I hope to see you in Dubai as soon as possible, and I hope to come there as well.
We look forward to greeting you here, Vinay. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
We're honored to have with us Ambassador Ronald Lauder, president of the World Jewish Congress and president of this roundtable business summit between the Jerusalem Post and the Khaleej Times.
Your Excellencies, distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, salam and shalom. I'm honored to join you today at this historic conference. For the first time ever, an Israeli newspaper and a newspaper from the Arab world, working as partners, have brought together distinguished politicians, experts and intellectuals from different nations in a conference for our future. More to the point, not just different nations, but the Jewish state of Israel and its new Arab Middle East partners. This is an important milestone. I'd like to congratulate the editors of Khaleej Times and the Jerusalem Post, along with their publishers, for this achievement. Even though we are speaking virtually and not in person, there is a triumph for all the people of the Middle East. You are all bridge builders, people who understand that peace is better than war. People who celebrate what we all have in common and not what divides us. People who want to leave a better world for their children and their grandchildren. People who understand that salam and shalom have the same meaning and carry the same message. And that message is one of hope, not fear. Let me be clear about one important fact. None of this would have happened without the courageous steps taken by the rulers of UAE, the Prime Minister of Israel, the President of the United States, and the Secretary of State, along with the leaders of Bahrain, Sudan, and Morocco. I am very hopeful that other nations will soon follow their example. At the same time, I continue to hope for and work towards a two-state solution for Palestinians and Israelis, so future generations will no longer live in fear and mistrust. I have always believed in the vision of peacemakers because I know this one simple fact, that neighbors leading productive lives together in peace, dignity, and prosperity is better than the alternative. As president of the World Jewish Congress, I am constantly fighting anti-Semitism, which has grown worse during this pandemic. But I am also aware that Islamophobia and the hatred against other religions and races continues. I fight these as well. And I will tell you, there must be no room for any of this, anywhere. We must fight all hatred together. People often ask me, why have I devoted my life to this cause? My answer is clear. Because I know future generations can lead lives better in peace. Because it is my duty as a Jew, and because Abraham was the forefather of all of us. And also, it's the right thing to do. Over my many trips throughout the Middle East and North Africa, I've had the opportunity to learn from conversations with your leaders, your teachers, and ordinary people in the street. It quickly became apparent that we all have the same concerns, the same hopes, the same fears. We also talked about our common bond as children of Abraham and what could bring us closer together. That is why today is so important. A great journey, a difficult journey, always begins with the first step. Today, after years of dreaming for this, we take these first steps together. Let's all remember, we could never have arrived here without the vision of great people who came before us, who led the way. People like Sheikh Zayed, the founding father of the Emirates, who believed in a multi-ethnic, multi-religious society. Yitzhak Rabin and Shimon Peres, who devoted their lives to the dream of peace between Israel and its Arab neighbors. I know how proud they all would be of the Abraham Accords. At the same time, we still have a lot of work ahead of us, especially in the field of education. Education is the key to a better understanding and a better future. This is how we will fight prejudice. Through education, we must also learn about the history of our peoples. In some cases, even the painful parts where deep wounds were inflicted. This won't always be easy, but we should never be afraid of an honest dialogue. Here's another true sign of hope. I'm so pleased that we're building a Jewish school in Dubai, which furthers the bold, inclusive steps the Emirates are taking as a leader in the cause of peace. I'm pleased to see so many Israelis boarding flights to visit the Emirates right after the accord was signed. As the president of the World Jewish Congress, I'm delighted that the Emirates are joining our organization, which already includes Morocco, Tunisia, and Bahrain. There is so much we can and will do together. In times of friendship and peace, a lot of good can be created, not only for the Israeli and Emirati societies, but the whole world. I wish this group a productive time. I hope we will soon have the opportunity to hold these gatherings in person. Let me close by saying, Mazel Tov and Mabruk to all of us for bringing bridge builders closer together, and peace be upon us all. Shalom Aleichem, Salam Aleikum.
We're honored to be joined today by the United States Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, from the State Department. Secretary Pompeo, it's an honor to have you with us at the Jerusalem Post Khaleej Times Conference. Thank you so much for being here.
Malcolm, it's great to be with you.
I want to ask you, the Abraham Accords, which you were obviously one of the main players and catalysts behind, is a stepping stone going forward when you think about the next administration. What advice would you tell them of how to keep this momentum going, especially when it comes to Iran and the threat that Iran continues to pose the region in the Middle East?
Well, one of the things that enabled the Abraham Accords was America's recognition that the most important players in this effort were the countries in the region, the Gulf states, Israel, all of those relevant players who are truly impacted by the Islamic Republic of Iran. So you asked, what would I tell the next administration? I certainly know what I think the right policies are with respect to Iran, and I hope they'll continue. But frankly, much of the action, much of the transformation that takes place was not just because of what the United States did. We were there as partner and friend, and what we did was important. But this has happened because it's the right thing to do. These sovereign nations made the decision to enter the Abraham Accords or begin to normalize relations, whether that's what the Moroccans have done or what the Saudis, what the Emiratis, the Bahrainis, the Sudanese have done. These countries did it because it was right for their own people. They did it because it was the right thing to do for the region. And these commercial relationships, these security relationships, these diplomatic relationships, I believe will continue to grow, and I hope the United States will continue to be an encouragement for that.
Do you see that Iran today is more isolated as a result of these accords, or are you concerned and maybe even foresee a possible conflict between Israel and Iran in the coming years?
Well, it's very clear that Iran is more isolated than it has ever been. That's a direct result of the policies that the Trump administration put in place. Our decision to abandon this ridiculous thing called the JCPOA, which enabled, armed, provided resources and money to the largest state sponsor of terror in the world. Tomorrow I'm going to talk about Iran and its deep connections to al-Qaeda as well. Look, these were a set of policies to put Iran in a place where it had to make hard decisions about its own economy and whether to feed and take care of its people, or continue to do the ridiculous things like arming Shia militias in Iraq, or their efforts in Syria, or Lebanese Hezbollah underwriting. We caused the Islamic Republic of Iran to have to make some really hard decisions by denying them resources. And then we said, look, we're going to go build out a security structure, whether it's the International Maritime Security Organization to patrol the Persian Gulf, or the efforts that we did to help the Abraham Accords come into effect, putting together the capacity for these countries to partner with Israel in important ways that preserved and created prosperity for those nations. All of those things are the right direction of travel for the entire region, not just those countries that have entered the Abraham Accords today, but every country in the region is safer, more prosperous, more secure as a result of these simple realities that this administration recognized, which I am very confident will continue.
But are you concerned about Iran looking towards the future and the possible policies that might change on that front?
Yes, of course. If we appease Iran, if we underwrite Iran, if we allow the Europeans to re-enter and create wealth for the Islamic Republic regime, the kleptocrats that are in charge of this theocracy, that'd be a bad thing for the region's security. It'd be a bad thing for Europe's security. It'd be a bad thing for American security. I hope the next administration will recognize that this isn't 2015 and will take on board the understandings that I think the whole world can recognize, which is that Iran is the destabilizing influence inside of the Middle East. They must be required to change the nature of the behavior in which they engage. And when they do, we can allow them to re-enter the community of normal nations. If they don't, the United States needs to make sure that we are part of a coalition that works alongside each other to promote security and stability in the Middle East.
I want to ask you, there were reports that were coming out in the last few weeks of the possibility that there would be another normalization with another country. Saudi Arabia was spoken about, other countries. And it seems that maybe what happened, the events last week in the U.S. Capitol, might have prevented that from moving forward. Do you think one has to do with the other?
No, I've seen no correlation between the two whatsoever. These normalizations, and I describe them a lot as along a continuum. It's not binary. You're not either normalizing or not in the truest sense. We've seen lots of countries move in the right direction, even if they haven't formally signed the Abraham Accords themselves. This direction of travel, this increased understanding of Israel as the rightful homeland of the Jewish people and a lawful entity, which is a great partner in which nations who are engaged in security relationships around the region should understand they should want on their side as a friend and an ally, not as someone who's an adversary that they pretend threatens them or their way of life. I think that direction of travel will continue. I think it's not just in the Middle East. I think you'll see this, as you saw with Sudan and Morocco. I think you'll see this happen in Africa. I think you'll see it happen in Islamic nations in Asia. This is a set of understandings which our administration has facilitated, which truly augur well for security throughout the region.
And you changed the U.S. standing, or at least the way it was defined in legal definition of Israeli settlement activity, or what settlements' legal status are in the West Bank. And we saw the announcement of new homes that are being built. Should we be concerned that this might spell trouble for Israel with some of the Abraham Accord partners?
So we've seen this issue of settlements there go on for a long time. What we knew was that we had to recognize reality. Let me give you a couple of examples, Jacob. So everyone knows the fact that we recognize Jerusalem as the rightful capital of the Jewish people.
Right.
It was just the reality, and we recognized it. Everyone understands that the Golan Heights are appropriately under the control of Israel. We simply recognize that. The same came with respect to settlements. They're not per se unlawful, and we simply acknowledged that existing fact. I don't think that threatens anyone's security or anyone's safety to acknowledge those simple understandings. Indeed, we were told if we did those things that all heck would break loose. That didn't materialize.
Right.
President Trump made the right call in each of those cases. We also acknowledge that we've got to try to work our best to find a solution to the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. We want that. We laid out a deep roadmap, the deepest roadmap for Middle East peace that anyone's put out. The vision for peace in the Middle East offered a real, true pathway for a better existence for the Palestinian people. So far, the Palestinian leadership has chosen to reject that, to even consider it. I regret that. I hope that they will join the conversation so that they too can begin to develop a relationship with the state of Israel that is normal and secure and creates more prosperity for the Palestinian people as well. We desperately want that. The Palestinian people, I believe, desperately want that. Palestinian leadership must get on board.
Well, Secretary Pompeo, just before I let you go, thank you for joining us again at the Jerusalem Post Khaleej Times Conference. And thank you for the role you played in helping make this conference possible between an Israeli newspaper and an Emirati newspaper just a few months ago. I don't know that this would have been able to happen. So we have to thank you also for that. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you all for doing this. This is the kind of thing that I think we're going to see flower and prosper in the weeks and months and years ahead. It's a glorious thing for the world. Okay. Good luck to you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. We're privileged to have with us His Excellency Dr. Tani L Zuhairi, Minister of State for Foreign Trade at the Ministry of Economy of the United Arab Emirates.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and Shalom. On behalf of the UAE government and our people, I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of our guests. Thank you to Khaleej Times and Jerusalem Post for organizing the UAE-Israel Peace and Prosperity Roundtable. I am certain that today's event will help to foster further collaboration between our two countries. As you may know, the UAE and Israel are two of the largest economies in the region, with significant potential for economic cooperation. In 2019, the UAE's GDP was $421 billion and Israel's was $395 billion. And since the signing of Abraham Treaty, it has been estimated that exports to the UAE could reach between $300 to $500 million annually, while the UAE investments in Israel could amount to $350 million a year. This is a testament to the many opportunities that lie ahead in trade and investment across many sectors. If we go in details in some of the sectors, for example, in the oil and gas sector, the UAE is looking to invest more in downstream activities, particularly in refining and petrochemical projects. Refining and chemical production is projected to be one of the fastest growing segments of oil demand in the coming years, and the UAE will be looking forward to a strategic partnership to boost investments in this area. Israel may be a natural partner for such energy projects. On commercial aviation front, the UAE and Israel are home to several of the world's leading airlines. Following the signing of the bilateral air transport agreement, UAE Airlines are now able to operate 28 passenger flights to Tel Aviv and unlimited flights to Riyadh every week, as well as cargo flights. The direct flights are expected to attract around 50,000 Israeli tourists to the UAE and will help to boost trade, tourism, hospitality on both sides while strengthening our cultural ties. Bilateral trade and logistics is also expected to grow. The UAE is home to the world's busiest airport for global travel, the largest seaport in the Middle East, as well as the first semi-automated container port in the GCC region. UAE and Israeli companies are working closely together to further promote the free flow of trade between Israel and the wider region through the development of port, free zone, and possibility of establishing a direct shipping line between our ports. In the space and advanced technology sector, the UAE has inspired the region and the world through the launch of the Hope probe to Mars. The mission reflects the UAE's ambition to drive innovation in science and technology in diversifying our economy. I also would like to take this opportunity to commend the Israelis' recent announcements to send the second spacecraft, Rishid 2, to the moon. This is testament of the great opportunities that lie in this sector. Our space agencies are working together to explore and exchange our know-how and learning to further advance the space sector. Greater partnership in the renewable energy sector is also possible. During the past 10 years, the production capacity of renewable energy projects in the country increased from 10 megawatts to 1,800 megawatts, and the next years will see this capacity grow by nearly 400% to reach 8,400 megawatts by 2030. Israel has more than 1.4 gigawatts of solar power capacity, and Israeli companies are developing new technologies, including solar thermal plants, improved lithium batteries, hydrogen storage, smart grids, solar generation balancing, biofuels, and floating solar power that the UAE could either invest in or adopt to. Agriculture and food security are critical issues for both nations because of our geography. Israel's agri-tech has been disrupting the traditional agriculture, forestry, and fishery market, which is valued at $3.3 trillion as of 2018. While the smart agriculture sector, currently valued at $13 billion, is expected to grow in the next 3 years. Our combined expertise in these areas holds a great potential for trade, research, investments, and collaboration between our nations. On the talent attraction front, the UAE government has introduced residency visas that are valid for up to 10 years for specialists, including doctors, engineers, inventors, and many other highly qualified professionals and their families. Students with outstanding academic credentials are also eligible for long-term residencies in our country. These measures support the UAE's efforts to enhance our standing as a global hub for talent, which will help drive our transition toward a knowledge-based economy. There are, of course, many other sectors that can explore together with Israel to help our economies grow. We all have a stake in making the region more competitive, more vibrant, and more prosperous, and today's event is a great step toward this objective. The UAE looks forward to working with the Israeli governments and business community to deepen economic ties and to realize the promise that peace offers to the region. Wish you all the best in the roundtable, and thank you so much for listening.
We'll now hear from Israeli Tourism Minister Orit Farkas HaKohen in an interview with Michal Divon from the Khaleej Times.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the UAE-Israel Business Summit hosted by Khaleej Times and the Jerusalem Post. And we're so lucky to have a one-on-one with Israel's Minister of Tourism, Orit Farkas HaKohen. Welcome, Minister.
Thank you.
So one of the most natural industries to benefit from the Abraham Accords is, of course, tourism. COVID is, of course, an impediment to that. But how do you envision tourism between both destinations in the post-COVID-19 era?
Well, the Abraham Accords and the normalization agreements between the Emirates and Israel is a real, it's something that we can look forward to. And I think that what it brings together a combination of two countries who can make 1 + 1 bigger than 2. I think that when we're talking about the Israel aspiration with regards to tourism, then that we have a lot to hope for and to look up to. I spoke already a few times with the tourism and economic minister of the Emirates and the several Dubai and the other places in the Emirates with regards to tourism. And we're looking forward to having around 100,000 tourists from the Emirates. And I think that what's nice about this collaboration is that it is the best illustration of how governments sign contracts of normalization, but people who are the ones who are truly making peace. And there's nothing like tourism to create the connectivity and the informal, connection between these two amazing traditions and civilizations, the Israelis on one hand and the Emirates on one hand. Minister El-Fassi, the tourism minister of the Emirates, said a very nice some very nice words in a conference that we both participated in London last November of the WTM conference. And he said that the Emirates is known to have a lot of flavors of cultures of people from all over the world. And there's nothing like having now Israelis adding to this pot of flavors.
Now, you mentioned that Israel is expecting to host 100,000, big number, although we know that already more than 50,000 Israelis visited Dubai before quarantine was reimposed. What kind of interest are you seeing from the UAE, from Emirati tourists? What are you hearing on your end?
From what I see tremendous interest in all aspects that Israel can offer for any kind of tourist. You probably know that although Israel is a small country, it has everything for everyone. If we're talking about the snow-capped Hermon, if we're talking about an amazing desert views, if we're talking about business tourism, and if we're talking about ancient history like no other, if we're talking about places that are the cradles of the 3 religions around the world, we're talking about the Misgad al-Aqsa, the Al-Aqsa, we're talking about Nebi Musa, we're talking about lots of areas and places that are part of the history of Islam and of course of Judaism, of Christianity. So Israel can offer a lot to everybody. Now, in terms of business, from what I know, the Emirates as a gas and the oil-rich country is looking to the future. And in the future, they're looking at prospering or developing in areas such as renewable energy, technology, innovation, high-tech. And in those areas, I think that there will be numerous places to collaborate on the commercial level. And in that sense, Tel Aviv is the capital of businesses of the Middle East. And we're looking forward to having and hosting all kinds of tourists from the Emirates. And I think that Israel is the perfect place to feel home away from home to the Emirates.
You mentioned some of the religious tourism aspects. I know a lot of Emiratis are very excited to be able to pray and visit the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the Temple Mount. How is Israel going to make sure that Muslim worshippers from the Emirates feel safe when visiting the Temple Mount?
Usually speaking, on a day-to-day business, all religions visitors, when they go to the mosque, this is done as a daily thing. It is done, it is working, everybody's feeling very safe, and there's no problems with that. There was one specific event that I heard of, and it was the exception. It was not the rule. I hosted the Tourism and Economic Ministry from Bahrain, El Zayani. He visited Al-Aqsa with no problems, and that is what we intend to do. We also prepared, like a round table with all the forces that are relevant for all our, new tourists from the new, Abraham Accord countries to make procedures even better and more smooth. And I think that in that sense, there is nothing new about tourists visiting the Al-Quds and the mosque and other places, and it is going to welcome them, naturally, respectfully, and as such a place that is so important to this religion should do. So I have no worries about it, and I think that as it operated before, it will continue to operate, and I think that it's a great privilege, for Israel to be a part of exposing all these beautiful pearls to this religion, and to be able to expose this to other and new people from the Emirates.
So another question that many people are asking me is, when will Israel reopen to tourists, and when will, of course, the different sects of tourism reopen, restaurants, culture? Of course, there's no way to predict, but looking at Israel's very successful drive to vaccinate the population, when do you expect we can see realistically Emiratis visiting Israel?
So this is exactly the $1 million question, like you said. But I think we're heading towards very good news. Like you said, Israel is among the fastest countries to get vaccinated. And, nearly 2 million Israelis already got the first shot of the vaccine. And, this week I will be the one taking the second portion, like many other Israelis. And we're talking about around the end of March time, where according to the Prime Minister, most of the adults in the state of Israel will be vaccinated already. And I think that if we're talking about the end of March, April, most certainly May, that will be the time when we will start opening the skies and having tourists back to Israel. As the Minister of Tourism, I'm very focused on that, on having a date, a destination in the calendar where I want to be the one to deliver the agents, the brokers, all the hotels in Israel that are working mostly with people like the Emirates that are coming, tourists that are not domestic. And I think that our challenge will be to give a date by which they will be able to prepare themselves in advance to such an important event of opening the sky. And I think it will be around April and so on. I hope that it will be even around Passover, which is at the end of March. But we'll see how things develop. I arranged a roundtable with the Minister of Health exactly for that purpose. We are sitting twice a week now to draw the line of how we give oxygen and we put the tourism sector back on business, back on its foot, in a new world of vaccinations. You have to understand that, I think, and I learned it even more during the COVID-19 prospects and the challenges, that tourism is not a privilege. It is, first of all, the most important thing for the soul, for having some, ability to go to different places and to overcome the stress of the COVID-19, to go to different places, to enjoy, to relax, and it is very important for the health. Other than that, I think that, tourism is an economic engine for the economy, both in Israel and of course in the Emirates. And also in that aspect, we are creating collaboration between the two countries to do cooperation with regards to flight packages, to marketing packages. And I think that it is not long before we would see, packages, marketing flights that you can be in Dubai and in Tel Aviv, you can be in Abu Dhabi and in Jerusalem. And I think that's an amazing, it's an amazing thing.
You speak about tourism as food for the soul. In a previous interview, you also spoke about tourism as a means to bridging cultural gaps and building those cultural bridges. Maybe you can share a bit of your vision on that. And also you mentioned the joint summit. Are there any initiatives that you can share with us taking place?
First of all, what we have done is that we are rearranging and refurbishing our, website of the tourism ministry in Arabic. I think it is about time, and it is a great opportunity to do so. We published papers saying what to do and what not to do, culturally speaking, about people from the Emirates and Bahrain and Israel. We know that Israeli has a culture of being very live and being very talkative and very open. And we're like the Sabres, we have a lot of, we're very edgy on the outside and very sweet on the inside. And one of the things we wanted to pass over to the Israeli people is how to behave in those countries, how to respect the other cultures, the Islamic cultures, and so on. We are preparing, just like in the Emirates, about how to prepare food-wise. Some of the tourists from the Emirates will be keeping halal, the traditional, requirements of Islamic observing tourists, just as that some of Israelis are keeping kosher food limitation. We already initiated a big webinar, which I participated in, with the collaboration that initiated collaboration between agents and brokers and flight organizations and airlines of the two countries who are already preparing the day after the skies are open. And the business world, as you know, has made a great business conference in Dubai only a few months ago, where all the leaders of the Israeli business market, headed by Bank Leumi, came over to Dubai, and there was a big business meeting between the business community in the Emirates and the leading business community leaders of the Israeli business world. And, things are going on in a very big pace. And we're just hoping that the COVID-19, which is the biggest obstacle at the moment, will finally be cleared out of the way, so we could start, breathing, of course, progressing and being and having a healthier, a life around the world. And I think that once the skies open, things will happen naturally. Even as we speak today, we have specific rules that allow business people to come from other countries, including the Emirates, to Israel. Now we are, during hopefully a last lockdown in Israel, together alongside with having the vaccinations in all around Israel. And I hope that once this is over, we can just open a whole new page of life.
Final question. You mentioned this being a very tough time. It is a very tough time for the industry, especially in Israel. How is the government going to help support the sector for the day after, when everything will open and there'll be this influx of tourists?
So first of all, we focused a lot of our efforts in the Ministry of Tourism and the government to maintain the infrastructure of tourism. When I'm talking about tourism infrastructure, we're talking about hotels, we're talking about village tourism, we're talking about tourist guide, we're talking about guides around the country, we're talking about, all the nature attractions and so on. So we were very focused on assisting them and aiding them financially. So once the skies open, they will be able to financially get up on their feet and start working. We have done that with several tools. First of all, there was a 300 million shekel compensation and aid fund that we established in the Ministry of Tourism that was given and actually is being distributed as we speak to different hotels in Israel that were basically shut down most of the time. During the times between the lockdowns, I fought for this industry. In most of the villages tourism, we call it tzimmerim in Israel, little places in the kibbutzim, in the moshavim, in more rural, in the suburbs of Israel. When you come and you're being hosted in a private villa, most of them kept their operation so that their infrastructure will be still available the day after the COVID-19. The most interesting pilot that we have made, I don't know if you heard of that, was called the Green Tourism Islands. What we did in the government is something very special that was also taught and looked at around the world. We took two areas that are very highly affected by the tourism, which is one of a city in the south of the country called Eilat, which is a city next to Aqaba, and it was in a really bad shape because most of its employment and economy situation is dependent solely on tourism. The second one is the Dead Sea. And we created a special mechanism by which they were called the islands COVID-19 free. All the hotels were operating there, all the attractions and the restaurants and so on. And people just came in doing COVID-19 tests. And we had over 200,000 Israelis washing these cities, giving them some oxygen and helped them, gave them a little bit of relief during that time. And I'm very proud of that project because it proved that we could live with this disease, and it gave oxygen to nearly 50% of the domestic, to over 50% of the domestic tourism in Israel during the COVID-19. So these are a part of the things that we are doing. We're now working, like I said before, with the Minister of Health about what would happen the day after. Our focus is, of course, the organization that are dealing with coming tourism. We need to provide them with a date so they can start preparing for that. We gave money for commercials showing Natseret and the Dead Sea, around the world about Christmas time, reminding tourists that Israel is the place to be there and that it's important for Christians. And we did that as a way to remind why tourists should come to Israel. We gave also funds and we created a project by which tour guides were giving money to give free tours around the state of Israel for Israelis, just to give them some work. And we had another aid fund that helped the people, organizations that are organizing tours to Israel. And we gave them also, money, aid, in order for them to be able to maintain the people who are now preparing the day the skies are open. So these are all actions that we did specifically for the tourism. It is not enough, and I wish we could have done even more. But we keep working, and I'm very committed to this important sector in the state of Israel because, if I want to wrap it up again, it is people who sign, governments who sign the treaties, but people and tourists who are making the true peace. So I think it's a very big, how you call it,
It's a big factor in creating.
A big message for me, and I'm very committed to this thing that is very important and has a message, not only economically, but also on the higher level.
Minister Orit Farkas-Cohen, our minister, Israel's Minister of Tourism, thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your insight. We all look forward to that golden date and for the day when the skies will reopen so that Israel can be open and welcome all the tourists that are looking to come and, of course, host our new partners here in the UAE. Thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure.
Herb Kanan, the Jerusalem Post diplomatic analyst, will now moderate a fireside chat on bilateral trade between David Leffler, Israel's Director General of the Ministry of Economy and Industry, together with Samir Chaturvedi, the CEO of the Khalifa Industrial Zone of Abu Dhabi, KTUaeisraelsummit.
Good afternoon. Thank you for coming to this session. This session is entitled Increasing Bilateral Trade. If we would have thought it just a few months ago that we'd have two senior officials from the UAE and Israel talking about increasing bilateral trade, most people wouldn't have believed it. But here we are with Samir Chaturvedi, the CEO of the Khalifa Industrial Zone in Abu Dhabi, KTUaeisraelsummit, and Mr. David Leffler, Director General of the Ministry of Economy and Industry in Israel. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Mr. Chaturvedi, let me start with you, please. Israel's finance ministry has said that they recently projected that within a couple of years, bilateral trade between the two countries could climb up to $6.5 billion a year, which would catapult the UAE into one of Israel's leading trading partners around the globe. Is that overly optimistic, or is that something that you actually think could materialize?
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for having me here. It's a pleasure to be involved in this initiative. Having lived in Israel myself, and worked and lived in there, it's always a great opportunity to talk to friends from that side. We talk about the 6.5 billion number. Looking at the two dynamic and innovative countries, I don't see this estimate being very optimistic. It's a very realistic number, which I believe that we should be able to reach in a couple of years from now. Abraham Accord is one of the most positive and bold initiatives in the recent times. It has created a lot of excitement and curiosity around. A lot of statements have been made. It's now time to start changing and transforming this excitement and curiosity into trust and confidence into each other. People need to meet each other. We need to create more people-to-people contact, engagement, and understanding to get people confident to invest into each other, invest together into new economies. We also see these two economies have been very, very similar in some ways. Same amount of people, similar population, similar size of economy, and same innovative, I would say, economies which have always punched above their weight in face of adversities all along. Resilience has been the main characteristic for both for UAE and Israel, where they have created value in these harsh environments over a period of time. We also see a lot of complementarity where, on one hand, Israel have created excellence into high tech, into advanced manufacturing, into agri-tech, research and development. And on the same count, UAE has created some amazing developments in trade, commerce, logistics. They have created infrastructure that connects the world. They have created airlines, shipping companies, and ports, which have connected the whole world together. Getting the two economies together, leveraging from each other's values, each other's value propositions, can actually create benefit on both ends. They can reach new markets, the sourcing, the technology can help produce cheaper, faster, better goods, and through the linkages created by UAE, it can reach into wider region much faster, much cheaper, much better. I'm personally very, very excited on the opportunities and the possibilities in there, and I'm looking forward to some wider engagement as the COVID situation improves.
Thank you. Mr. Leffler, let me ask you the same question. This goal of $6.5 billion, it sounds kind of astronomical. Is that real? And Samir talked about building trust. How do you go about doing that?
Well, I agree with my friend, Mr. Chaturvedi, I hope I said it right now, that we can be optimistic. We can be optimistic for the reasons that my friend just mentioned, is that we are both very export-oriented countries, economies. We are open societies, diverse population, and good business community. And I also agree that now, after the excitement and after the official ceremonies and the governments celebrating the event, now it's time for the business communities to meet and talk to each other. And if I go to the figures, I can give you some figures that just to show the potential. If we talk about the UAE import, let's say in precious stones and metals, around $58 billion a year. Israeli exports in the stone and precious stone and metals, okay, about $12 billion. So you can see this two figures meet, and we can produce a lot of business out of it. So there's other figures that can show that the potential is great. And now, how you build trust between the business communities? Again, I agree with my friend that you have to meet. We have to get to know each other's culture. It's not so very different, I must say. And I just, with a grain of salt, I would say that the Israelis maybe are very, very harsh to get to the business right away. And maybe the Israelis should be a little bit more patient and take the time. And I was in Dubai in the GITEX conference a month ago, and I saw many, many Israelis there. I hope that we learn to take the time to get to know the people. It will take some time, but again, I'm very optimistic.
Mr. Chaturvedi, your industrial zone, Kizad, has recently signed an agreement with the Manufacturing Association of Israel, a body representing about 95% of industry in Israel. What benefits do you see coming out of this industry for both sides?
I will continue from what I said some time back. We need to get engagement between people, between businesses, between organizations, and that's where the trust starts building. We have already started our movement on that subject. We have been in discussion with the Manufacturers Association of Israel and their members for some time. A very interesting body run by professionals. The interaction over the last few months have been very, very encouraging. I'm confident that we will see something big happening. On one hand, Manufacturers Association of Israel represents 95% of the industry in Israel. On the other hand, Khalifa Abu Dhabi Ports is one of the major gateways of trade for UAE, and Kizad and Zones Corp, the two platforms, are the primary platform for industrial activities within UAE. This agreement is very, very significant as it opens the dialogue between two major platforms, two major bodies of industrial development that provides new opportunities to its members in industrial cooperation, in transfer of knowledge, R&D, bilateral trade, and in technology cooperation in many ways. This will open new market for sourcing basis for both Israeli and UAE companies. On one hand, it will provide better upstream sourcing for both countries' customers or industries where they can find better technology, better way of producing things. And on the downstream side, with the kind of infrastructure and connections created by UAE, it can actually help Israeli companies take their products to the wider regional market at a much faster pace and in a much efficient way. Frankly, you see magic happening when two countries like this or two strong forces come together. I'm very confident that this association will slowly start showing results as we interact more and more with Israeli companies and as we bring these organizations together. Our focus is to make sure that we create a constant recurring dialogue between the industries on both sides, get the people meet each other and create business on their own. So we are the platforms which are integrating, and hopefully we will see some results very soon.
Thank you. Look, we only have time for one more question, so let me turn to Mr. Leffler. Tell me, Stuart, were you surprised at both the pace of how things have moved and also the warmth that you see on both sides in doing business one with the other?
Yes, I was privileged to be on the first mission to UAE in September, and it was very, very exciting. And in a way, I was surprised. I would say. Maybe just two points that I would like to make. First of all, I was surprised on how we were welcomed by the UAE officials. And second, I was surprised a little bit with the practicality. I was surprised for the good, with the practicality of the people. They talked business right from the first moment. And in our culture in the Middle East, sometimes, the business meetings start with talking about everything and then get to the point at the last minute of the meeting. And here I saw, I would say, a very business-oriented community that, okay, let's talk business. Okay, we know the abrahamaccords, everyone is happy. What's next? Very practical approach, and we could relate very, very well to that.
Great. Okay, very nice. Thank you very much. I appreciate you both being here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I'm honored to welcome His Excellency Hamad Bouamim, the President and CEO of the Dubai Chamber of Commerce, who's joining us today at the Khaleej Times Jerusalem Post conference. So, Your Excellency, I'd like to start with COVID-19, right? It's slowed down economies across the globe, but I think it also creates some opportunities, especially for countries like Israel and the United Arab Emirates, two countries with relatively small populations. What opportunities do you see on the horizon for these two countries?
First of all, thanks for having me. Of course, COVID-19 impacted the whole of the world, and the year 2020 was a very difficult one for everyone because health and safety was a priority. And when countries start realizing control of that, they start turning back to the economy. And we hope that the economy will be the focus going forwards. Economies or small economies such as Israel and the United Arab Emirates have certain opportunities with the current agreements that's been signed for a number of reasons. I want to start saying that, with the recovery that we are looking for going forwards, everybody is looking for new markets and looking for new demands to support the recovery. And we hope that the markets between both of us will give certain opportunities for our businesses in terms of a new area that's been opened on. And like when you look at the demands for Israeli agricultures, will have more interest from Dubai and UAE sides. And from the other sides also, Dubai will have more interest from the Israeli tourists in terms of hotels and retails. I would say that's point number one. Point number two is with this crisis also, there is more and more emphasis in a number of sectors that's always been of interest, but maybe they start getting more interested during this crisis. And here I'm naming the healthcare sectors, right, the technology sector, and the agriculture. Right. And we believe that this will open new avenues of cooperations between businesses and governments from both sides to deal with a number of issues such as the digital transformations or the area of food securities, the pharmaceutical and the medical equipment, etc. So definitely such crises will give opportunities for these sectors. And we hope that looking forwards in year 2021, and the fact that Dubai will be hosting the World Expo, the timing also of our agreements will be of interest because we believe it will be a good avenue for Israel to showcase all its abilities, technologies, and know-how, not only for the region, but for the world. And definitely starting almost, I would say, a year before this event is a good thing for showcasing what Israel can do. But again, COVID-19 challenges, let's hope it's behind us, and let's look forward for year 2021 with the opportunities that we want to build on.
Well, as you say, inshallah, as we say, please God, but it's all the same. I want to ask you also, Israel, ever since the Accords were announced a few months ago, I'm curious in the larger Emirati business community, how has this been received? What's the sentiment that you're feeling? I know that you've met with Israeli business delegations, but what are you getting your sense from your colleagues? Are they accepting of Israel? Is it a warm embrace?
I believe it is warm, and there is a lot of excitement in these relationships. Again, maybe the timing, as you said, is when everything is quiet and you start seeing a new business relationship with a lot of excitement of what this can bring for us going forward. It is extremely positive. This is what I want to tell you. But what's really important for us is really to build the relationships.
Right.
And it's beyond just, the limited excitements of now and then, but we need to look for more of medium to long term. And we need to have a win-win situation for both sides that everybody can build on for a long term.
So one of the things that you did was you signed an agreement, a partnership of sorts, together with the Tel Aviv Chamber of Commerce. Can you tell us what's the substance of that agreement? What does that actually look like?
We wanted something systematic. So actually what we signed is beyond an MOU. It's more of strategic partnership between us and Tel Aviv Chambers and the Federations of Israel Chambers of Commerce. We specified very specific outcomes that we started delivering a number of them already. And the first thing was about conducting a joint study. Usually when one side look at the other sides, they are kind of one-sided, but we wanted to do something jointly where we can represent Dubai and businesses from UAE, they can represent Israel and what's happening over there. And we look at the opportunities that hopefully we can find. And this is what we published already. So this study, we see it as a guiding.
And it maps out the areas of collaboration. Is that the idea?
Of collaborations, right. Opportunities. And this is a living document. It's just the start of which areas we believe that can add value for both sides. It's provide all the statistics and information that hopefully will help businesses to take it forward. And number two, also, we agreed to organize a number of activities and events and webinars to be able to educate the businesses of what can be done and also to educate them about challenges. We have to be fair and clear about the opportunities and the challenges. We also agreed that we will replicate visits from both sides. So we were lucky to receive a number of delegations from Israel already, and we hope that we'll be also be able to take a number of delegations going forwards to Tel Aviv and educate them with what can be done. And we're doing this, again, based in this strategic partnership. And we are hoping, of course, also to be able to strengthen the relationship by opening a representative office of Dubai in Tel Aviv. And this is something the Federation of Israeli Chambers will come to host, and we are studying that. Our aim here is to facilitate, educate, kind of guide the businesses and connect them to build relationships. And from one side in Dubai, we are the public institution representing all the businesses, but we understand the situation is different in Tel Aviv and in Israel. And this is where also through this strategic partnership, it was extended already to the export institutions and to the manufacturer associations. And all of these institutions are representing businesses. So already we are building between our institutions here in Dubai and in Israel, a good relationships to help the businesses build the relationships in the right way and the right system.
Well, Hamad Bouamim, the president and CEO of the Dubai Chamber of Commerce and Industry, I want to thank you for joining us today at the Jerusalem Post Khaleej Times conference. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
I'm honored to be joined now by Sylvan Adams, a Canadian-Israeli businessman, philanthropist, and you call yourself something of a self-appointed ambassador. Am I right, Sylvan?
Yes, thank you, Yaakov. I'm pleased to be here with you. When I moved to Israel 5 years ago, I had, the first week I arrived, I had business cards printed with a new title, which reads Self-Appointed Ambassador at Large for the State of Israel. So, and this is what I've decided to devote the next chapter of my life to, working on projects that promote my new adopted country.
And a lot of that is public diplomacy, right?
Yeah. So, yes, what I'm trying to do is use sporting and cultural events, focusing on Israel, bringing really the true face of Israel to the public arena. So, I've been asked, a lot of my projects have to do with sports, and I've been asked, are you mixing sports with politics? And my answer is no. This is not partisan. This is not politics at all. This is diplomacy, as you called it. Right. We're bringing a message of peace and cooperation. And so for me, this, nobody can be against that. And so it's really using sport and other cultural events as a vehicle to create people-to-people contact and promote the true face of Israel, the benevolent, true, peaceful face of Israel.
We'll dive a minute into some of those projects, but I want to, this conference is about bringing the Jerusalem Post, the Israeli newspaper, together with the Khaleej Times and Emirati newspaper. And you were I saw the signing of the Abraham Accords at the White House a couple months ago. What brought you there?
So first of all, I want to say it's quite remarkable that these two media entities can come together from the Emirates and Israel and hold a joint conference. This is a remarkable achievement, which was brought about by the Abraham Accords. So we're living in a new world, a new era, and it's very exciting. And to think that peace is breaking out in the Middle East, it's a beautiful thing. I was honored and humbled to have been invited by the United States to attend the White House signing of the Abraham Accords. Israel had no guests, so I didn't come in as an Israeli. I was there as a guest of the United States. And remember, I'm not American. I'm originally a Canadian, so it was a particular honor. And it was a historic event. I was actually at the Tour de France with my Israel Startup Nation bicycle team, which was competing at the Tour de France. And I left the race bubble because we were all in bubbles in this time of COVID. I left the race bubble to go to Washington. And then I flew back for the end of the race in Paris, but I couldn't re-enter the bubble with my team. And as I said, it was a historic achievement, and it was a great honor for me to have been asked to attend. And it's beautiful to see peace breaking out.
sports, as because you invest a lot in sports, and you mentioned the Israel team that you had at the Tour de France. You recently signed on Chris Froome to join the team. He's a 4-time winner of the Tour de France, and I know that they're training right now as we speak. Right, the team is training, and he's training as well.
Yes.
What is it about sports that brings people together?
So I think sports has the largest television audiences of any activity, on Earth. So I'll give you as an example. When I brought this big start of the Giro d'Italia to Israel, we were seen. All of Israel. This bicycle racing takes place outdoors. All of Israel was seen from Haifa in the north all the way to Eilat in the south, with beautiful aerial photography, and it was seen by about 1 billion television viewers around the world. So it's a way to reach large audiences and bring this message of sportsmanship, of cooperation, of genuine friendship, and showing, as I said, the blue and white colors, the true face of Israel, as we race around the world in peace and friendship. And I think sports is a great tool to show our best foot, if you will, our best face around the world. So signing Chris Froome, arguably the greatest cyclist of this generation, with 4 tour victories, who will be vying for a record-tying 5th tour this summer in July in France. He's the biggest name in the sport, so he brings a lot of attention to our team, and it's very exciting to see Chris, racing in our colors with Israel on his jersey, and he's going to bring us a lot of attention. And he's coming back from a terrible injury. He basically has missed almost 2.5 seasons, and he's just coming back now and regaining his form. And we're hoping to be very, very competitive this summer in France and vie for the big victory, the record-tying 5th tour win for Chris Froome.
Well, that would definitely be amazing if Israel were to win the France. But I also, I know there's some biking competitions that you're also involved in with the Emirates. Can you tell us a little about that?
Yeah. So, last year we competed in the Tour of the Emirates for the first time. My Israel Startup Nation team, we were invited to participate, and it was amazing. And this was several months before the signing of the Abraham Accords, and we were so well received in the streets of Dubai and Abu Dhabi. We had fans lining up to get autographs from our riders, and get souvenir water bottles and things. And it was beautiful to see Emiratis embrace us, and the word Israel is on our bottles, and taking autographs and cheering for us, and riding in the streets, openly in the streets of Dubai. And I said at the time, we're making people-to-people contact here, and creating friendships and introducing ourselves to new geographies and new people. And I said, we're creating conditions that one day, when our leaders find it possible to forge a peace together, we will have set the conditions for a warm peace. Little did I know that just a few months later, those words would prove to be prophetic.
Your cycling team trailblazed the path to peace, right?
I would say there was the judo competition that was held in Dubai, which was also very significant. Our judoka won a gold medal in the competition, and Hatikva was played, and the Israeli flag was raised. And by the way, I do support the judo as well. So it was a very emotional moment. And for Hatikva to be played in the Emirates, it was a breakthrough at the time. And then a few months later, my bicycle team came, as I said, and we rode openly in the streets of the country, and we were embraced by the people. So I do believe that we forged these bonds and created conditions for this peace agreement to be a warm peace because we've already had acceptance. The people are accepting this piece. It's not just a top-down situation, right, but really it's top and bottom, and it seems to be a real piece, a durable, lasting, warm piece where we will have cultural exchanges and business exchanges and diplomatic exchanges, and I'm excited to be part of it. And I was excited to be there, before it happened. And we're going to be heading to the Emirates again in February, while the conference is going on, as a matter of fact, to race again in the Emirates. So with Chris Froome will be there. He'll be our headliner, and we'll be trying to win the Tour of the Emirates this coming February.
Well, I mean, that'll be amazing, and we look forward to seeing you at the conference that we're doing in February in Dubai with the Khaleej Times. I want to just shift for a moment and talk about the day after Corona, right? You're very involved, business, but also philanthropy. What had stopped from projects that you were trying to get off the ground before Corona took over our lives, and what do you have lined up for the day after?
So one of the things, if we're talking about, again, cooperation with our new Abraham partners, is perhaps expanding this tour of the UAE to include other signatories of the Abraham Accords. Bahrain that also has a professional cycling team, the UAE, which has a professional cycling team called the Emirates team, and of course our Israel team, and maybe hold the same race in the three countries. And I've reached out to leadership in those various in our partner countries. The Bahraini team is owned by His Highness Sheikh Nasser, the second son of the Emir, and he's a bicycle enthusiast, and he rides himself. And we have a date together to go for a bike ride, and so he's very keen to pursue this thing. And we have his friend Sheikh Tahnoun of the Emirates. And so we're discussing this, and COVID has kind of slowed things down in the sense that we can't really meet in person and get to and warm up this process. But we will get there. Israel is leading the world in vaccinations, followed by our two Abraham Accord partners, and so we're the cutting edge, leading the world in vaccines. In population being vaccinated, and hopefully, by the time I think by the end of March, I think all of Israel will have been vaccinated. So we'll hopefully be free to go about the world and promote our projects.
You've also invested recently in building a new emergency room at Khaleej Hospital, and also created a new project at Wolfson Hospital to bring children from all over the world who are in need of heart surgery. What is the underlying message? Like, if I have to look at Sylvan Adams, you got the bicycling, you got the sports, and you have the hospital. How does it all come together?
So look, it's two sides of the same coin, in my opinion. It's showing the best face of Israel abroad, as I mentioned earlier, but also looking after Israel itself. And providing infrastructure for Israelis. And because we have such a big heart, as you mentioned, the Wolfson Hospital, we take in children from all over the world. It's an amazing fact that 1% of children are born with a heart defect. And we have this beautiful program called Save a Child's Heart. And we send our heart specialists to countries, to third world countries, largely in Africa, but we also bring in Palestinian kids. So two days a week is Palestinian Day, and kids from Gaza and the West Bank come to Wolfson Hospital. They're greeted in Arabic by Arabic-speaking professionals, nurses, doctors, orderlies, because of course we have a approximately 20% Arab minority in Israel, so that they're being brought into our system. And when you have your heart surgery, you need to spend a few weeks So they typically spend about 3 months in our home. We have a group home, and the kids from the Palestinian kids are there with the African kids, and this is their home away from home for several months, and they get to live in Israel and experience the warmth and the big heart of Israel. Our Jewish imperative of tikkun olam, saving the world, improving the world, is on display, and really so. I'm very proud to be part of this beautiful project, building a children's hospital there in the city of children, Holon, which didn't have those facilities beforehand. And of course, the children's hospital will serve Israelis as well. And the emergency ward at Ichilov, again, a very big, beautiful project. The emergency facility is the entrance to a hospital, and Ichilov is the principal hospital of Israel's metropolis, Tel Aviv. So it's important to build infrastructure. It's also, we do receive, in the case of, again, coming back to Save a Child's Heart, we've done some outreach to some of the Arab countries. We've treated Syrian kids, we've treated Lebanese kids, we've treated kids from Turkey. Now I hope that we can bring our technology and techniques to our new partners, Bahrain and UAE, and perhaps Sudan and Morocco, and so we're reaching out to the rest of the world, and as I said, practicing the Jewish imperative of improving our world, tikkun olam.
Well, Sylvan, it's always great to speak to you. I want to thank you for the interview and for joining us at our conference, our inaugural conference with the Khaleej Times. And we look forward to seeing you in person, maybe riding in on your bike at the conference in Dubai in February.
So I will be there with my bike.
Okay.
Maybe we'll make a guest appearance. Maybe the three teams, Bahrain, UAE, and Israel, the three teams that have place names, which is very unusual, by the way, for cycling. It's usually teams are usually named after sponsors. These are the three teams that are named after places, after their home country. So maybe we'll have an event where we bring riders from the three countries and really show how this peace agreement is truly working and creating these people-to-people bonds and bonds of sportsmanship and friendship.
Amazing. Sylvan, thank you very much.
It's been my pleasure, Yaakov. Thank you.
Thank you. Michal Divon from the Khaleej Times will now moderate our next panel on investment and tech partnerships, together with Dr. Ibtasim Al-Bastaki, the Director of Investment and Public-Private Partnerships at the Department of Dubai Health, Khalid Al-Mazurki, the Director of the Commercial Enterprises at the Khalifa Industrial Zone in Abu Dhabi, and Nir Hollander, the Country Manager for Israel, Cyprus, and Greece at Nutanix.
So hello to everyone and welcome once again, and thank you to our panelists for joining us this afternoon. We are going to discuss trade, tech, and health sectors that are all driving cooperation following the Abraham Accords between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. So I would like to start with you, Mr. Khalid. Recently, Abu Dhabi Ports and Israel Manufacturing Associations signed an MOU. Now, I've seen very big figures predicted in terms of trade potential. Maybe you can share with us how you see this partnership moving forward. What sectors do you think will be driving bilateral trade?
First of all, thank you, Michael, for moderating this interesting panel. We all agree here that the relations between United Arab Emirates and Israel will definitely actually bring a lot of business opportunities. In Abu Dhabi, in the industrial zones, both Kizat and Zone Scorp, we already have witnessed actually many such business that actually is approaching us. For example, actually, we have several meetings with the agri-tech companies. Because we understand that the technology in Israel, they are actually leading in the war. That's why it's actually something needed in UAE and also needed in the regions. While in other hands, UAE can provide can provide the right logistic actually for the companies in order for the Israeli companies to expand globally and bring the global consumer market in one location. Now, besides sectors, I also want to highlight that what I have witnessed through our interactions with Israel, similar to UAE, almost 95% of the companies are actually coming from the SME sectors. And in Abu Dhabi, both as I mentioned, Kizat and Zonos Corp, we are providing the right infrastructures, creating the right ecosystem for those companies to be closer to, for example, to the raw material or to the supplier or to the service logistic in order to make sure that they are growing globally.
Now, if we're looking, this is one sector, of course, trade. I want to take it over to health. These accords were signed during a global pandemic, which we are all very much aware of. And perhaps it's symbolic that both Israel and the United Arab Emirates are now leading in the vaccination efforts. So looking ahead in health, and this question is, of course, for Dr. Ibtisam, what do you think the two countries can offer together in terms of this partnership? And what do you think we can develop and drive the vaccination effort even further?
Indeed, basically, the market here is very dynamic in the United Arab Emirates and particularly in Dubai. And there is a lot of great opportunity if you look at it from the supply and demand. And of course, this pandemic has initiated a lot of creativities and innovations in the healthcare market. So there is a great opportunity in terms of the vaccinations. And nowadays, I think the vaccine is going quite fast in terms of, of the pandemic itself. And on top of that, we are looking for further collaboration in developing more opportunities in regards to the kind of like a health innovation, genetics, vaccinations, and precision medicine, which is the future of the healthcare in this market, as well as globally. So the UAE and especially Dubai has a great interest in the next 2 to 3 years to focus on precision medicine, genetics, as well as the research and development.
Thank you. Nir, we're coming to you now, to Israel. Aside from the obvious negative effects of COVID-19, this pandemic has also offered an opportunity, especially for online service providers. You're, of course, in the space. How has COVID-19 affected your industry, also as far as Israel, and how are you looking to expand business in the region?
So I think overall what we're seeing in times of uncertainty, which is probably this time and what we're experiencing at the moment, is mostly that customers are leaning towards not committing to something, right? And this is why they're taking the path of subscriptions. Now, subscriptions can either be obtained by a service, which is what the cloud is all about, or on the other hand, you can also procure subscription on your own premises. And this is what we basically do. Everything we provide to our customers is subscription-based, which means that they can turn it on or turn it off whenever they need, whenever they want to. So that's just one vector of it. The second one is when they spend wisely, right? They want to make sure that they don't overspend or spend where they don't see any return on investment. And I think this is a time of clarification of how do we spend our budgets. This is also something that we're working together with our customers in times of uncertainty with our cloud economists. And we are providing them a clear financial, I'd say, vision of how they're spending their budgets. Now, the third vector is productivity. And when everybody is working from home, organizations still need their employees to be productive. So there's a huge investment and a huge shift from working in offices to working remotely. This is, of course, it requires spending with setting up the infrastructure that supports it. either on-prem or off-prem, with cloud services or any consumed service. This is also something that we are working together closely with our customers, both existing customers and potential customers, on establishing the best way to set up that remote working procedures.
Thank you. And turning it back here to the studio, Mr. Khaled, if we focus on manufacturing in the UAE, how do you see Israeli companies positioning themselves to benefit from the free zones?
Actually, as you highlighted in the first questions, first of all, we have signed a memorandum of understanding with manufacturing associations of Israel. And the objective was actually also the objective was actually of these sessions is to reach to as much as possible of Israeli companies to showcase to them actually why UAE actually became the preferred destinations, not only as a logistic hub and also as industrial hub. So we actually would like actually the Israeli companies to take this advantage and using the ecosystem that is being created in Abu Dhabi in order for them to expand both as UAE is a big market and also GCC and the regions. Speaking about the free zones, I want to mention here that the free zone is not about only the regulations as some people know. It's actually creating the right infrastructures for the company, both soft and hard infrastructures, in order to make sure that they have the concept of actually of easy of doing business and bringing the global consumer markets to actually Abu Dhabi, since we have actually very strong when it comes to connectivities. I would like to mention here that within just 1 hour from our zones, there is 4 international airports. There is a railway that connecting the cities in UAE, this upcoming railway. And hopefully it will be connected also to the GCC railway. There is also a highway that is actually from one side connecting you to Saudi Arabia market, and the other side it goes all to the Arabian Sea. So it goes across different cities, different consumer market within UAE. So creating that ecosystem, what we did recently within our zones, we created parks, I will say, business parks within our zone. So we have, for example, polymers park, automotive, food zone. We have the logistics zone, the pharma zone. The reason why we want to create a business where the customer can come, have an access to the raw material, do the manufacturing, the suppliers there, the distributors there. So in order to make sure that he is being served within one custom bounded area, which is known as the free zone.
And we are seeing very ambitious predictions talking about even reaching $4 billion yearly when it comes to trade ties. So we will definitely be looking at that. Turning back to health once again, I think one of the first significant MOUs signed was in the health sector between Sheba Medical Center and Abu Dhabi-based Apex. So what I'm wondering, Dr. Ibtisam, how do you see both countries who are looking to really further position themselves as medical tourism destinations? Israel is already a very big medical tourism destination. Dubai is looking to become more of a medical tourism destination. How could this partnership work, and how can they help advance each other in becoming really a hub for medical tourism?
Okay, let me first elaborate a little bit about the market itself in UAE, because you really need to understand the demand and supply in this market. And plus, based on that, you need to identify the gaps and opportunities, especially if you're looking at it from the healthcare perspective. You really need to look at the various specialities that is not existing in this market. This is one where basically there is a great opportunity for the investor to come in and look at it and to invest and to become a unique because we have a various clients in this market, and people comes from different parts of the world, to receive their treatment from the medical tourism. Especially, we are talking about various specialty like fertility, cosmetic, dentals, and the orthopedic, and the rest. But these are the four important specialty that I have mentioned. And still, we have different specialties existing in the market. And if you look at the past, since 2012 until now, there is an increase in expenditure in healthcare sectors in UAE, and especially in Emirates of Dubai, around 12% per annum. And that's because of the mandate of the health insurance that's been existing in this market. And then, therefore, this will attract a lot of the investors to come in. And we look at it from the specialty-wise. For instance, like next 2 to 3 years, we want to invest in rehabilitation, innovative primary healthcare. We would like to invest in cardiology, in oncology. And those are the specialty where the government even looking at it from various perspectives. And the next 3 to 5 years, we would like to basically look at the investment from the genetics, what I have mentioned earlier, precision medicines, research and development, and maybe palliative care. This is one of the things that is missing in this market. And if you look at it from the other aspects, government as well encouraging a lot of public-private partnership projects where the private sectors come in hands to hands with the public sector to streamline the business, to bring a better business cases, as well as to identify the risk and to split the risk between the public and the private sector, and to have a good quality of care and efficiency and effectiveness of the services. And therefore, you can attract a better kind of like investors having their stamp in the country, where you can attract more customers towards that kind of a services. So there is a law in Dubai, it's called PPP law, with a PPP guideline, which will encourage a lot of investors to focus on various specialty when it comes to the partnership. Currently, we are working on a various projects, and more projects of the PPP will come into the market, and this will attract not just only providers or investors or financials, but even though those companies, product companies, innovative company, technology company, who would like to become as a third party investing in the project itself. So it's kind of like a holistic win-win situation between the public and the private sector.
And indeed, we look forward to seeing the different partnerships and how both the health systems and services are boosted thanks to the Abraham Accords and the new opportunities that are coming forth. So Neil, back to you and to the online space. Both the UAE and Israel are seen as regional hubs for innovation. How do you envision the tech leaders collaborating on future projects and endeavors?
So I think overall, and this was discussed earlier, Israel is a big exporter for different technologies, right? The agri-tech, biotech, fintech, and defense technologies. But also on high-tech, we are perceived as being the startup nation. And I'm trying not to be too vain here, but basically they say that other than the Silicon Valley, Israel has the highest number of startups per population, per size. And together with that, UAE and the Emirates overall is considered a very innovative culture and territory. So I think in parallel that we can also learn in return. There's immense activity going on at the moment with setting up the foundation for this cooperation. I'm seeing activity by banks, by legal offices, by government entities, by industry delegations. This is to set up the infrastructure to be able to support those partnerships later on. For Nutanix specifically, we are active in all verticals in both countries, in every market, I would say. The bigger verticals that we usually see are the public sector, the finance, and healthcare. As I said earlier, we're active in all three of them, and I believe that with the setup of the right infrastructure, we'll see more and more cooperation spring up.
Thank you. And I think we're seeing these collaborations across different fields. So very exciting times for us. Even during COVID, we're seeing a lot of these MOUs and partnerships start. So the sky is the limit for everything that will happen the day after, which we are all very much looking forward to. That's all the time we have, unfortunately. I'd like to thank our panel, Dr. Ibtisam Al-Bastaki, Director of Public-Private Partnerships at Dubai Health Authority. Also, thank you to Mr. Khalid Al-Marzouki, Director of Commercial at the Khalifa Industrial Zone in Abu Dhabi, also known as KIZAD, and from Israel to Nir Hollander, Country Manager, Israel, Cyprus, and Greece for Nutanix. Thank you for sharing your vision and insight with us today. Thank you.
We're honored to have with us Rafael Nagel, the chairman and founder of the Abrahamic Business Circle, who's with us today at the Khaleej Times Jerusalem Post conference. Rafael, it's great to have you. And I wanted to start with what prompted you to found and initiate this business circle, the Abrahamic Business Circle? Where did the idea come from?
I'm living in Dubai since 2017. I'm coming to Dubai since 2001. Being a German Jew, it was always amazing being here. And the idea from the Abrahamic Business Circle came mainly because, thanks to the great vision what the UAE had already many years ago, of 2017, they started with the idea of the Abrahamic House. We followed their idea with the Abrahamic Business Circle, and we believed that we want to create a global business platform for business people all over the world, independent of religion and other backgrounds.
And Israel fits into this now with the Abraham Accords in what way exactly?
Absolutely. The main issue why we have started the Abrahamic Business Circle was thanks to the Abraham Accords, when we signed the peace agreement with the UAE and the other countries. So it was the starting point for our great idea, what we already had many years ago.
And it's to bring businesses together, right? So it's to...
Our unique aim is to create, we believe in economic diplomacy. Mm-hmm. In other words, we really believe very strongly that we can create bridges and build bridges if we are able to make business together. That's our main aim. Right. We believe in the idea of building very soon strong business relationships between Israel, the UAE, and the rest of the world.
Now, you've been in Dubai for a number of years, as you mentioned. You've been quite successful when it comes to your own business. But if you could give us maybe just map out what are, if I'm an Israeli businessman and I'm thinking about going into business in the UAE, what are the tips? What are the areas of collaboration that you see as maybe the most promising for Israeli companies?
To be really honest, the UAE is an amazing business platform. It's a global hub. We see the UAE not only for the market of the UAE, we see it as the trading point for all the GCC area, but also mainly for the rest of the Middle East. The main places where I think you should invest, where you should come over, is agriculture, cybersecurity, healthcare, but also investment. There are huge investment opportunities here in Dubai, but also in the other Emirates like Abu Dhabi, Fujairah, Russia, Cayman, and so on.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned, as being a German Jew and living in Dubai for a number of years, what's that been like? I think that for many Israelis, the Abraham Accords kind of opened up the UAE and showcased really a tolerant country and a government that recognizes and respects Jews. But for many years, Israelis didn't necessarily know that to be the case, but you've been there a long time. What's that been like?
It has been always amazing. The UAE always have been very respectful with all the different religions, and I never had any issue about being a Jew here in this country. It's really unbelievable. As long as you don't interfere in other people's beliefs and things, you will find any problem here at all. Mm-hmm.
When shifting back to the business, trade today is just kind of picking up. Do you have an expectation of to what levels this might reach eventually?
Of course, absolutely. For example, just before this interview, I had a phone call with a very dear friend from Fujairah, and we can see already big agricultural projects in the Northern Emirates that are starting. We can see Israeli water technology, Israeli greenhouse technology getting here placed. We can see common projects guaranteeing for both of the countries food security. Yeah. So we really can see that trade will pick up very, very soon. I think in a medium term, we should have a trade volume of around about $5 billion per year easily. $5 billion.
Wow. And right now it's, just maybe a couple hundred million. So that would be a huge boost.
It will happen.
Excuse me?
It will happen. I'm very sure about it. I can see it. We can smell it. We can see there are so many things going on. It needs a little bit of settlement. And of course, we need a little bit to get over COVID and these travel restrictions. But as soon as you see that we can open here the companies, we can move, you will see that the volume will be absolutely amazing for this year.
And the sentiment that you're getting from your friends and fellow business colleagues in Dubai, in the Emirates, of Israel, is it with hesitancy, is it apprehension, or is it they looking at this and really embracing the opportunity?
No, they see it as a big opportunity for all of us. I just had lunch this afternoon together with a few friends. One was from Switzerland, the other was a local guy, and we all three considered that it's a big opportunity for all of us to create a global business platform here in the UAE. And it's so amazing to have the Israeli colleagues here. They're everywhere. We can see them. We get totally new input. We get new technology to the place. So I really believe it's a big added value for all of us.
Israelis are everywhere, and you can't only see them, you can probably also hear them. But you had mentioned to me that in the Abrahamic Business Circle, you have members from all over the region, right? This isn't just UAE-Israel, right? Could you elaborate a bit from what other countries people are coming to?
We have, funnily enough, we already have members even from countries like Pakistan or Sudan. Sudan, okay, it's still understandable, but you have to think that here in the UAE, we have round about 24% of our population are Indians, round about 14-15% are Pakistani. And in the Abrahamic Business Circle, we already have members from Pakistan, Sudan, Morocco, Algeria, even South America, we have different members already. And what we are really trying with the Abrahamic Business Circle is to create a global business network of contacts where we all can exchange our ideas, our network, and without any religious or other backgrounds.
And when I was in Dubai just a few weeks ago for my first visit, it really felt to me that, yes, government to governments make peace, but it's about the people who fill that peace with true substance. And it seems that that's what you're trying to do ultimately, right? That's the vision here.
We believe in this economic diplomacy, as I mentioned. We really believe that we both have a business together. We have common economic interest. If we have a daily contact, thanks to our business, with time, we also will build up a very strong friendship and relationship. And we believe that this friendship and relationship will be the solid base for this amazing peace agreement.
So before I let you go, Rafael, just give me 2 quick tips that you would tell Israeli businessmen before coming to the UAE. What do they got to do? What do they have to keep in mind to do business the best way possible?
Be as transparent as possible. Be very straightforward. Have very clear ideas what you want to do in the country. And mainly, enjoy the country. It's an amazing place to come over and to do business. Unbelievable. You will like it.
Okay. Well, Rafael Nagel, the chairman and founder of the Abrahamic Business Circle, it's been a pleasure having you with us today. Thank you very much. Abdul Karim Hanif from the Khaleej Times will moderate our next panel on health tech and healthcare, achieving the unimaginable. He'll be joined by Sharif Bashara, the Group Chief Executive Officer of the American Hospital in the UAE, and Dr. Muhammad El Radha, Director of Projects at the Management Office of the Dubai Health Authority.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the UAE-Israel Business Summit. My name is Abdul Karim Hanif, who's going to be moderating and leading the discussions alongside our panelists who'll be talking about the world of healthcare and the cooperation between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. This conference has been organized by Khaleej Times, and we're proud to invite our panelists to discuss the healthcare system and the cooperation between the two states. And it is going to be Mr. Sharif Bishara, the Group Chief Executive Officer at American Hospital, as well as Dr. Mohammed Al-Rada, the Director of Projects Management Office for the Dubai Health Authority. Now, September 2020, in fact, was a fantastic and a landmark year for a month for both the countries as we saw the Abraham Peace Accords being signed. Now, let's start talking about what's going to happen following the signing of the peace accords. Let's start off with Dr. Mohammed Al-Rada, Director of Project Management Office at Dubai Health Authority, with your thoughts on this.
Thank you, Karim, for your question. I think the peace treaty or the peace signing agreement there gives both parties huge collaboration platforms and potential. Specifically, and being a technologist myself and an informatician by training, I think the more collaboration, the more innovation that would be built from this relationship. The world is looking upon this agreement, not only the region. I think the entire world is waiting on collaborative, innovative collaborations between the two sides to come up with exciting innovation for the world. And I know the vaccine there is on your list of questions to be asked later. However, I think the vaccine is only a stepping stone. More potential is going to be yielded out of this relationship and out of this agreement. Yes, the United Arab Emirates is a young nation. However, the strides that have been taken, specifically in the technology sector, have been huge. The infrastructure readiness for both technology and infrastructure, road-based infrastructure, is also ready to take us to the next level. So we're hoping a lot. We have high expectations, and when I say we, I don't only mean the United Arab Emirates or the region. I mean the entire world.
Well, there's lots to carry the hopes for indeed. So let's get Mr. Sharif Bishara, your thoughts in terms of any constructive partnerships that you're working when it comes to health tech and the medical sector between both the countries.
Yeah, hi, Karim. But before we start and answer your question, let's highlight, first of all, the strengths of this agreement, the peace agreement. Usually the peace is chosen by the governments, and the business and collaboration chosen by the people and the nation. And in that agreement, it's pretty clear that the government and the people and the nation in both countries, they are looking for the collaboration and they're looking for that. And I remember one day before the signature, one of the big hospitals in Israel, they approached us and start asking for collaborations. And we took it from there and we start working on couple of collaborations. The first in terms of the artificial intelligence and the research, and we're working very closely with those organizations. It's a huge in Israel. The second one, we're working very closely in data. Right now, data is oil, and data is the future. And there is no research, there is no technology without that data. So very soon we'll announce on collaboration on both areas, the research and the healthcare transformations for the whole region.
Certainly exciting times for that when it comes to exchange of data and medical cooperation. But medical tourism is also another massive avenue that the Dubai Health Authority and the other medical authorities in the nation would be hoping to bank on. So let's start talking about the benefits that both the countries and how can we facilitate the growth of medical tourism bilaterally. So Dr. Mohammed Al-Rada, if you can shed some light on that.
Well, medical tourism is a two-way street. Yes, the United Arab Emirates has been sending patients abroad for treatment for some very unique specialties or rare specialties, which makes sense for us to send our patients abroad to the best centers out there. And I think the agreement will also fuel that sort of a relationship where we will be sending patients abroad for treatment in the best centers that are available in Israel. Now, what we have also been working on is the other way street, is to have patients being treated in Dubai, in the United Arab Emirates. The quantum leap, if I may use that word, that the United Arab Emirates entirely has seen with its healthcare infrastructure, and we certainly have wonderful examples here amongst us, from the American hospital in Dubai to many, many others, be it the public sector or the private sector alike. We have certainly seen patients from abroad coming to Dubai, enjoying what the city has to offer, and getting treated at the best centers. And of course, the world-renowned faculty that Dubai has been able to attract due to its quality of life. So the two-way street, I think, is going to continue being a viable two-way street, a sustainable two-way street. Certainly as research builds up in the United Arab Emirates, and it has been building up wonderfully over the past 20 years with universities such as the United Arab Emirates University, UAU, and Mohammed bin Rashid University, MBRU in Dubai. I think both have been, and many other universities, of course, have been spearheading the research in the region. So I look forward to this collaboration with health tourism, where the patient can come and enjoy the city, enjoy its offerings, and as well benefit from the healthcare services that it has to provide, which are world-class right now.
Well, certainly are world-class over here, and we're hoping to climb those international rankings as well. And we've seen with the recent annual index for the year 2020, Israel has been viewed as the 10th most healthiest country in the world as well. So let's start talking about boosting the healthcare and health segment in the United Arab Emirates through the help of the government and this new cooperation with Israel. What are the ways is the government focusing on it, and how are we seeing this collaboration growing in terms of boosting the healthcare system? If I could ask Mr. Sharif Bishara to shed some light on this.
That's very interesting, because you're asking a private sector what the government is collaborating, with and what the future for that. But actually, your question is extremely right, because one of the advantage that we are seeing in UAE is the public-private partnership, and that we are looking for. And you can figure out during the pandemic and what's happened, all of us without exception, we respond to the pandemic very well. And we are one of the top countries in the world that respond to the pandemic. In terms of the collaboration, if you are talking about, definitely, you know that we have different type of expertise in healthcare, different schools, the American schools, the UK's, and many other things. We can collaborate with Israel. We know that might be there is a shortage in physicians. When, for example, the ratio is a little bit lower than UAE. Here, our ratio is extremely high. It's almost 3 physicians to every 1,000 patients. So we can collaborate in that area. On the top of that, for the vision and the strategy of the whole country for the healthcare transformations, there are many things we are bringing on board with the support of the government and with the support of the public-private partnership. We can deal with Israel in a proper way and have the healthcare transformation all over the region, all over the world, not just between 2 countries.
Now, let's move on very quickly to the vaccine, this fighting the pandemic, as we rightly highlighted. And yes, the agreements between the 2 countries were formalized in September 2020, but we saw the partnership developing all the way back July 2020, when we saw the Israeli aerospace industries and Rafale defense systems working and collaborating with G42 Healthcare. Talk to us about how we can expand and accelerate this, the vaccine drive that we're seeing, and in making sure that we have an effective policy and being the model for the world when it comes to the inoculation of the population. So let's start with Dr. Mohammed Rada to shed some light on the collaboration between Israel and the United Arab Emirates in this vaccine drive.
I think the best judge is to look at the current ranking of both countries in inoculation speed. It's quite accelerated. Both countries are between the top 5, maximum going to the top 10 I think at any one time, this rate of accelerated inoculation, vaccination has been fueled by such partnership. Of course, we benchmark against many countries. We always look at the best countries, and certainly Israel has been top one on many days so far. Of course, the vaccine has been out for a very recent time. Now, the vaccine is only one avenue. As you mentioned, there is another avenue, which is the aerospace industries. I think the informatics space is also very promising. We look at the oncology space as well, where many hospitals in Israel have been at the leading front, where they have been treating and getting great results with certain types of very unique oncologies and tumors, where patients have been disadvantaged for many years, and unfortunately we lost many. However, certain centers in Israel have achieved amazing results. So there are multiple avenues. We can sit and mention them. I think the list will be ongoing. The vaccine, as I mentioned, is only a stepping stone to this collaboration.
Stepping stone indeed, but a very important one as well. So, Mr. Sharif Bishara, if you can shed your thoughts on what's driving both the countries to be ranked so highly, and what are we learning from this partnership, and can we expand it further?
Because honestly, there are many areas we can expand it within the healthcare, and the good thing, the healthcare sector is the big winner out of all of this agreement and peace and collaboration. Because when it comes to healthcare, patients comes first. So right now, there are many comprehensive centers, like Dr. Reda mentioned, on colleges. Okay, right now we can see in UAE and Dubai, in Abu Dhabi, there are very advanced and many advanced centers for oncologists, but we can get the expertise, for example, from Israel on the organ transplant in terms of research and that data. And I think it's time to build a hub for the healthcare transformation, okay? And both countries can partner it and can work together. Both countries, they are very similar in how their visions to their people, how their strategy to their people to achieve the best for their people, to get the latest technology. I know that UAE is not for so many years in technology in healthcare. But when you see how the vision and the strategy of UAE overall can get a benefit out of dealing with Israel on their history and what they achieved already, okay, to build for the future, for the passion and the policies of United Arab Emirates. And when we mention about the vaccine, Dr. Reda already commented, but we see that UAE is one of the great examples that within few days, they reached to almost 10% of the population they already vaccinated. Okay, it's not by luck. That's a lesson learning. We can provide it to our people and friends in Israel and get from them what their experience on many other areas. The good things, as we always mention, here in UAE, rather than the healthcare in terms of science, how you push all your people, despite the nationalities, the colors, the religions, everything, that everyone under one umbrella believe in the vision of the country. How that achieved? It's a lesson learned. That's one of the things that it's behind all of this success. We can share our experience with the people in Israel, and we can achieve the best out of that. Because not everything is just the science, but how to get the passion, how to build the passion of your people to achieve and believe in your vision. So I repeat it again, all the people within UAE, you're living in the UAE, all the people, despite the nationality and that, they believe in the vision of the leaders and they're working on it. And right now, if you ask any hospital, American hospital, King's College, Cleveland, whatever it is, what the vision, he will answer immediately is that digitization and healthcare transformation. So that's one of the lessons that I believe we can learn it to many other countries.
Plenty to learn, and this is the first few pages of a new story and a new historical cooperation between both the sides, and we'll look forward to greater collaboration in the near future as well. But for now, that's it for our panel discussion on the health tech and healthcare achieving the unimaginable. Thank you very much for our panelists this afternoon, Mr. Sharif Bishar, Group Chief Executive Officer of American Hospital, as well as Dr. Mohammed Al-Rada, the Director of Projects Management Office at the Dubai Health Authority. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts this afternoon.
Thanks.
Thank you, Al-Karim. Thank you for Khaleej Times and Jerusalem's Post for having us.
Steve Lindy, my colleague and the editor of the Jerusalem Report magazine, will moderate our next panel on tourism, seizing the moment as opportunity knocks. He'll be joined by Adel Ahmad El Radcha, the Chief Operating Officer for the Emirates Airlines, Avisheva Boshana, founder of the BPG Group, and Fleur Hassan Nahum, the Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem.
Welcome to our panelists, Adel Ahmed El Radcha, the Chief Operating Officer at Emirates Airline, Avi Boujani, the Chief Executive Officer of BPG Group, and Fleur Hassan Nahum, the Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem. And Fleur, we'd like to begin with you. How did you get involved in tourism between the United Arab Emirates and Israel?
Well, wonderful being here in this wonderful panel. The truth is, my portfolio as Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem is foreign relations, tourism, and economic development. So part of my portfolio is trying to figure out how to enhance Jerusalem's profile as a tourist destination. When the peace accords and the normalization agreement was announced, I saw that there was an incredible opportunity to market Jerusalem, which is the third holiest Muslim site, Haram al-Sharif, to the Gulf as a new and interesting and historic tourist destination. So that was my original motivation. And my 2 trips to Dubai and my 1 trip to Bahrain has only strengthened my resolve that the Gulf, tourism in the Gulf is looking for a wonderful product like Jerusalem. Also for historical reasons, for religious reasons. It's a new type of pilgrimage that we can look forward to, as we've had for the last 20, 30 years, Christian pilgrims coming to Jerusalem and being a huge part of the economy of our tourism industry. I really feel there's an incredible opportunity for the new era of Muslim tourism. And I think that for Jerusalem, it's even more significant because 40%, almost 40% of the population of Jerusalem is Arab speaking. They're the Arab community of Jerusalem. And I think that this involves a very natural bridge between the tourism industry in Jerusalem, the Arab community, which is an integral part of our tourism industry in Jerusalem, and this bridge to the Gulf and to a new era of Muslim tourism. So that's how I got involved. And what we're busy doing at the moment in Jerusalem is building that perfect product for the Gulf tourist, be they from Dubai, from the Muslim community, but there's also in UAE, many Christians who would also love the opportunity to come to Jerusalem. And so at the moment, we're focused on building and personalizing that tourism product for the new era of Gulf tourism.
Thank you. And Avi Boujani, tell us a little bit about yourself and the BPG Group.
Okay, thank you. The BPG Group is a marketing solutions group. So we have verticals that focus on creating advertising content, doing public relations, doing social media, and doing digital marketing across. We are a 40-year-old business in Dubai. WPP, the world's largest marketing services group, is a significant but minority shareholder in our business. The group was set up by late Maid Ahmad Al Ghurair, who amongst a lot of other things had also set up a bank, which is today called Mashreq Bank, etc., etc. The group has been intimately involved with the evolution of Dubai and the region. And one of the flagship projects that I had the good fortune of being involved with was the evolution of call it a tourism, call it a retail, call it an experience product called the Dubai Shopping Festival. So we had evolved the idea and I sort of brand managed it for nearly a decade. And we learned a lot of lessons and, hopefully some of those lessons today, the Dubai Shopping Festival, we are still experiencing that right now as we speak in January of this year. And we also did a few other products.
Adel Al-Ritha, you are managing the biggest airline in the Middle East. How do you see the route to Israel opening up the region?
I think opening a route or a link between Dubai and Israel, for sure, it gives the opportunity to both sides. But I would say it is really more from the Israeli side is opening, give them the opportunity to go to Dubai, but beyond Dubai. In a very quick couple of hours, 3 hours, transiting in Dubai, but really giving them the chances to take advantage of the Emirates network in the Far East, subcontinental, Australia, and so on. So definitely it will enrich the route, and it will provide much more facilities to both sides.
Hassan Nahum, you talked about increasing Muslim tourism to Israel and especially Jerusalem. You yourself have been to Dubai and you've set up at least 2 organizations that promote relations with between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. Can you tell us a little bit about them?
Sure. So back in already for about 1.5 years, I've got one of my partners called Dorian Barak, who's been doing a lot of business in the Gulf for the last 10 years, was telling me that normalization was really, really becoming much, much faster. And so he's been telling me for a while, the new frontier for Israel is the Gulf. So in about June, which was already 2 months before the actual accords were announced, we said, let's just set up a business council, because we at the time estimated that there were about 250 Israeli businesses working under the radar in the UAE. And I know stories of friends of mine who were supplying products, who had to change the made in Israel on the label, and all these ways to get around, but essentially doing business with the UAE and other Gulf countries. And so we already felt this. We were talking to the American government, and we felt there was something coming. We didn't realize it was going to happen so soon. So we set up the UAE-Israel Business Council in order to build those bridges, to open those doors. I think there's an incredible amount of desire by many businesses on both sides to connect, but nobody actually knew how. So I think we started working in a vacuum where people just wanted to connect, but they didn't have the tools. We said the minute that normalization was announced, we set up an online platform called the UAE-Israel Business Council, UAE-IsraelBusiness.com. And we asked people, what are your areas of interest? So we gave them an option to tick off a couple of verticals to see which areas they wanted to do business. And up until today, we have over 3,000 members. And what's really interesting is that it's not just Israelis wanting to do business with the Emirates, it's also Emiratis wanting to do business with Israel. And so this gives us an incredible amount of data that we can use in order to build those bridges. So we've been very busy doing events, giving people the roadmap of how to do business in the UAE, connecting them to people that they're interested to do business with, and working on the different verticals to build those bridges. And we truly believe that once we open those doors, the free market will do its work. The free market will do its own job. And it's just up to us to open those doors and build those bridges. And so far, it's going very well. Last month, we ushered a deal. We match-made a deal of an Israeli water tech company with a local large manufacturing group in Dubai, and we look forward to doing many more of these matches. And of course, a lot of the matches, a lot of people coming through, also people from travel and tourism, and again, we're connecting those people, doing events around different verticals, and ensuring that people can reach each other.
Avi Boujani, you're based in Dubai. You just heard what the Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem said about opening doors. How do you see UAE-Israel ties developing from here?
I think there's a considerable interest in UAE historically and for the future, with a lot of positivity towards Israel, and all the opportunities that tourism, both social, recreational, as well as business tourism, will drive. And I see a bigger opportunity in global interest. Clubbing, for example, Israel and UAE as dual destinations, somebody coming from North America, somebody coming from Australia. The chances are families or individuals who come either for business or for pure leisure can plug both. It's multiple destination, and that's where I think a lot of interesting products that can be created. I'm sure Mr. Adil Al-Reda can talk much more about it.
Adil, you heard that comment. Tell us exactly how the Emirates airline is coping, and especially with the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic.
I think that we're all over the world trying to deal with this pandemic in the best way. Emirates have introduced many measures on board aircraft and airports to try to enhance the sanitization and impose social distance at airport area. But we are working closely with different governments and with within the UAE government to try to introduce different protocols like PCR testing in and out of the countries to encourage and really introduce some kind of safe measure to our travelers. These measures, I think, but the issue is becoming different countries and different governments have a different view of how they go around border controls and introduction of these measures. And us, we are sparing no effort to opening new destinations. We are now close to or a bit more than 100 destinations worldwide where we are trying to put our flight into. And we have seen a very encouraging result from wherever we place or open a new route. For example, if I take some of the destinations, we did operate at close to 90 and 100% seat factors on both directions. If I look at the Israeli Tel Aviv, Dubai route with the existing flights we have between Fly Dubai and the other Al Al and other airlines operators, they were operating close to 90 and 100% during the Christmas time. So it shows you that people are wanting to travel, people have a desire to travel, and with the right measures we put in there, we are able to control at least the spread of virus.
Thank you. And Fleur, you also see the Abraham Accords as opening up relations between the Gulf states and the Jewish world. Tell us about that.
Absolutely. Well, Adel is completely right. There were so many tourists coming from Israel in December. I think everywhere I went, all I could hear was Hebrew. So it was 50 to 70,000 Israelis went to Dubai in the middle of a pandemic. So you have to understand what the potential is. Just when we have those facts and figures, and it's going to be huge. But I think that this goes way beyond just Israel, and it includes the Jewish world. And I'll tell you why. In North America, South America, and a lot of Europe, as you know, Steve, probably better than anybody, we have a lot of Jewish delegations of communities of different Zionist organizations connected to Israel, of all types, of all sorts. When I was in Dubai and Bahrain this time, what I was hearing was that there were a lot of tour operators from the United States or from Israel that serve the delegations from the Jewish world, and they were cutting deals and partnerships and joint ventures with local tourism companies for bringing delegations of American Jews, South American Jews, European Jews, that now, when they do a trip to Israel, as they normally do once a year, as we know, they're going to be including a Gulf component to their trip. So now the trip to Israel is not just going to be a trip to Israel, it's going to be a trip to Israel and the Gulf. in the way that many years back, Steve, we used to have people doing a trip to Eastern Europe to visit the Jewish communities of Eastern Europe and then Israel. Today, that is going to completely change to include a component of the Gulf. And this I know from my trip to Bahrain as well. And of course, from my trips to Dubai, which means that Israel and the normalization agreements has not just opened the tourism market in Israel, which is significant for a small country. I mean, we estimate that about 4 million Israelis travel abroad every year, which is for a country of 9 million. That's crazy. But on top of that, you're going to have the Jewish world visiting the Gulf as part of their trip or yearly pilgrimage to Israel. And I think that's going to be very significant. We already see the UAE preparing for kosher food provision. I'm seeing the same trend in Bahrain. And who knows, inshallah, many more countries that will open up to Israel in the Jewish world.
Avi, what initiatives do you think can be taken to develop both countries, Israel and the UAE, as mutual tourism destinations?
First, a disclosure, I haven't had the good fortune of visiting Israel yet, but I'm looking forward to doing the same very, very soon. I think this delay has happened partially because of regulatory historical reasons and largely in recent times because of COVID. But that said, I think Dubai is just not a great global destination today. Dubai has also become an exceptional destination for virtually every aspect of tourism from a luxury standpoint. So if I may say my humble 2 cents worth to Mr. Adil Reza is, I was hoping that there'd be more Emirates flights to Israel than fly Dubai, because that would create a greater global connect and more easily. And I genuinely believe that Israel would pick up a lot of things from Dubai in terms of global luxury tourism, because that's where Dubai has perhaps, in a way, outperforming the south of France and Florida on a lot of parameters. So in terms of the quality of entertainment to the quality of dining, and to take from Fleur, F&B restaurants are fast getting into kosher food provisions, because Dubai is extremely inclusive. So irrespective of what religion or what your beliefs are, Dubai is able to deliver to them, and UAE as a country. So I see a lot of, I think Israel would perhaps benefit from Dubai's experience with luxury. That's at one end. And at the other end, Israel could also benefit from the Emirates Airlines strategy of connecting 2 major metropolis of the world through Dubai. And now that can be extended to Israel as well. But Mr. Adil will speak, I'm sure, a lot more about the Emirates strategy on that. But we're blessed to be living in Dubai, and we're blessed to have an airline that we call ours, which is Emirates.
And Adil Al-Itqa, we will give you the last words. How do you respond to those last remarks? And what is your vision for the future? Do you see flights expanding to Israel and perhaps including destinations such as Eilat as well?
Yeah, I thank you for the great comments. I think one thing definitely, Dubai and UAE and Israel, they got a lot to offer. In terms, there's a lot of heritage, investment, and science, I think, and IT technology to gain from each other. But we are an airline, and definitely the more we connect to cities and capitals, the more we give opportunity for the various kind of levels people to maneuver and move from one region to another region. Yes, we have a plan to operate to Tel Aviv, as you correct saying. Emirates is an international airlines, and Tel Aviv is part of our plan to be part on Emirates network. So on the very near future, we would be commencing or stating the date. But definitely that will give the opportunity to both sides of the world, not only, I think, in UAE, but in the region. I guess it's to facilitate and expedite the traveling time. But from the Israeli, for sure, it will link Tel Aviv to the 130 destination. Emirates will be recommencing back, as we have right now 102 flights or 102 destinations. So I think all over there is a lot of an opportunity in different area and different fields, and many people would like, I think, to see the heritage, and there is a lot of history in Israel that maybe they did not have an opportunity in the past to visit and go and see. This will really facilitate that.
Well, Steve, just to add on to what Adil's saying, I think that there's a real opportunity for Dubai to become the connecting airport for Israelis and a lot of the West to the East, the way that in the past we've seen with Turkey. And I think that there's a real opportunity for Dubai Airport to really take over from Turkish airport, where lots of Israelis connect with all over the world. And we look forward to that because we have a very budding, wonderful new relationship and warm peace with the UAE.
Thank you. We agree with that. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'd like to, on that upbeat note, thank all our panelists for joining us for this interesting discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. Sheba.
I'm now pleased to welcome my colleague Muhammad Zainabi, the editor of L'Observateur de Maroc, who will interview David Toledano, the president and of the Jewish community of Rabat, and talk about Morocco as a strategic platform for investing in Africa.
Hello, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank everyone for being here today. I'm Mohamed Zainabi. I'm the editor-in-chief of the weekly magazine L'Observateur du Maroc et d'Afrique and its news website l'observateur.info. It is my honor to moderate this segment of the debate dedicated to my country, Morocco. I'm pleased to welcome Mr. David Toledano, who is the president of the Moroccan Association of Building Material Industry, and his industrial experience gives him a wide picture of our economy. He is also member of Moroccan Board of Employers, la CGM. Mr. Toledano is also known as a community leader. He was distinguished by King Hassan II as Chevalier of Throne Order and by King Mohammed VI as officer in the same order. Being an economist, he started his career in public administration and international institutions such as the World Food Programme and United Nations Industrial Development Organization. Hello, Mr. Toledano, again. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for your invitation, Mr. Mohammed. Thank you very much.
So I'll begin this segment by posing a rather philosophical question to you, Mr. Toledano. For you, what link is there between prosperity and peace?
Oh, usually it's strong links. You can have prosperity without having peace and stability. So war is always a bad thing. So even if you have some industries working during that time, at the end, everyone is losing. So the best moment that we can have are peace moments. So we hope that this partnership that we have should last, and we are really, we hope, a strong and mutual benefit partnership between us.
Thank you for sharing your personal vision on this important question. Just like you, Mr. Toledano, I firmly believe that working hand in hand together is so important so that peace and prosperity prevail. Now let's go into the backbone of the subject of this debate. What could you say, Mr. Toledano, about the first ever contact that has taken place between Mr. Shakib Khaleej, the president of la CGM, of which you are actually a member and the president of the Manufacturers Association of Israel, Mr. Ron Tomer.
Yeah, this is very special, as you say, and this is the first event that we could have between Moroccan Board of Employers and Israeli Board of Employers. So you're speaking about a meeting, a video conference that took place on the 4th of January between Shakib Al-Hash, the president of CGM, and Mr. Tomer, which is the president of the Manufacturers Industrials in Israel, and Mehdi Tazi, vice president, and also Dan Kataviras, which is the general director of foreign trade in this organization. So what I heard by the president Al-Hajj was that the first contact were very, very positive and very promising on the relationship between the two countries.
Mm-hmm. So, the African continent is constantly being raised in all discussion between Moroccan and foreign investment. To what extent do you think Morocco can act as a bridge to bring together Middle Eastern and Near Eastern investors to Africa, which is known, as you know, as the continent of the future?
Yeah, I just want to add one thing, that this contact between the two boards and the two presidents of employers in Israel and Morocco was just after a meeting between our Minister of Industry and Trade and New Technology, Mr. Moulay Hafid Al-Arami, and Mr. Perez, who is the Israeli Minister of Industry. So if you saw the pictures, it was a little funny because Mr. Perez, as Moroccan origin, Israeli, said to his colleague, let's speak in Arabic a little bit and in Moroccan Arabic before we start talking in English. So that show you that's the links and the strong links that we still have between Morocco and Israel. And this is special things that could help also the relationship to be strong. To come back to your question, this is really very important. Morocco was one of the very first countries to be strongly linked with Africa. Hassan II, in his book, talked about Morocco, compare Morocco to a tree, deeply rooted in Africa and lives where in European winds. So this image gives you the how the relationship between Africa and Morocco is an African country, is important. So this 10 or 15 years, the King Mohammed VI made many journeys to Africa and important trips with important delegations, and every time signed many agreements with each country. But also we were part of the continental free zone, the African free trade agreement, which includes 54 countries. And it's a process, and we had to start. And this process started at the beginning of this year. So Morocco was one of the first countries to invest and to be in effective presence in Africa. First, by making a very strong net with the Royal Air Maroc, which is the Moroccan company, aircraft company, and we have a real hub. And as I said, we have a new road for Israelis to come from Israel to go to Africa from Casablanca instead of going to Paris or to other countries to go down to Africa. Mm-hmm. Also, we developed banks in Africa, and we have 3 of the biggest bank actings in Africa, and they are doing very well. We have also strong companies doing well. And in my field and in business, in building and business, our entrepreneurs are very effective and are working in Africa. Myself, I've been in 2 or 3 countries, and I can tell you the strength of the links. Also, we have business schools, and we have many schools to train, and a lot of African students come to Morocco to study and to go with French Moroccan business school like HEC or others. We have military academies who receive a lot of people to be trained in those schools. We have a lot of architects in our schools in Morocco. Mm-hmm. So those links and those contacts gives to Morocco a very special position. So since maybe this last 10 years, many leaders, when they come to Morocco, claim to be associated with Morocco to enter Africa. Israel, on his side, has also a strong presence in Africa. In education, also training for water, agriculture, and these all promising sectors and all those pillar sectors, economic sectors, are also strong in Morocco. So we can develop them in Morocco, and then to be the bridge that you talk about to go to Africa and to strengthen the links between Africa and
Middle Eastern countries.
Yes, and also Morocco. Morocco is a very stable country. When you talk about peace, it's well known, one of the most stable countries in the MENA sector.
It's important.
We are in a crossroad between North and South and East and West to be part of a very special place and to be a hub for enterprises who invest in. Morocco was receiving foreign direct investment this last year's maybe number 2 or number 3 in the whole zone, which according to maybe 30 to 32% of the whole investment in Morocco. So that's why I think it's a major place and should be effective, not only big talks, but will be in effectiveness with the Israelis to strengthen this position and this market. As you say, Africa is the future, and it's concerned 1,300,000,000 people, and it's time for everyone to help and to rise this continent.
Mm-hmm. And Morocco is the first investor in the African continent. For you, what are the promising sectors specifically that may be subject to multilateral co-investment?
I think in Morocco, the providing sectors are very diverse and important, different. So we can start by basically agriculture and also water issues, because Morocco, as diverse countries, has a huge surface in place, and the water issues are now more and more on the table, and we have to face them and find a solution for the near future. Israel could help a lot in this field. We can talk about textile, which is more natural. We can talk about R&D concerning industry. We could talk about nanos industry, because we don't want to go back to heavy industry. We have no time for that and no strength to create a heavy industry, but we have to go to the same or to develop with the Israelis the high level and high value processing, high technology, security, water, agro-industry, tourism, of course, fish farming, a lot of fields. As I say, our imagination is no limits for the
cooperation. Yeah.
But what I said, I have to say that we personally, I rather prefer that we start with the strong collaboration and cooperation between states and also big institutions who are strong enough to have the finance and to have the technology and to have the people and experts to to be successful. We can't afford any no success. A lot of people are looking at us and they're waiting for successful stories. So I wish and I hope that we'll start with the big stories and very successful stories, so we can be the samples and the examples for the other countries, and also made this peace process larger and larger. And I'm confident that Morocco should have a special place in this picture.
Okay. In order to build a successful example, is it especially through the CGM that the development of the cooperation between Morocco, Israeli, Emirati, and other entrepreneurs can take place? Or do you think it would rather come from the investor's side, who can short circuit the formal channels by promoting direct contacts?
CGM is a confederation to ease things, and we are going to invite, and certainly we are going to be invited to go and to visit Israel and to receive investors here in Morocco. But we have in Morocco special institutions who can help any investor. I'm thinking of the regional centers of investments, they're called CRI in Morocco, and you can go on internet and have all the communication, and they are ready to help anyone to go through the administration, the authorization, and to have and to be on his side until he'll be ready to work. On the other side, we have also an agency for the investments called AMDIE, and the AMDIE is also taking care. They give a bank of projects, so you can choose project who can be interesting, and also they can have people who could help investors to come to Morocco and to go through the rules and to go through all the administration and to short all the authorizations and to help anyone. CGM is, of course, a big organization who can help and put people together and also find partners, strong partners for joint ventures, and to give her blessing to some strong joint ventures. But I think we have institutional canals, and those I talk about especially from the regional center of investments, who are people knowing everything about that, and make their job is to make easy for all investors coming to Morocco. So that's my position in this.
And it's clear. It's clear. Lastly, and to conclude our interesting discussion, I would like to ask you, Mr. Toledano, once again, a final question that resembles my first one. In the post-COVID-19 world, do you believe that there will always be room for co-investment? In other words, do we not run the risk of falling back into chauvinism and economic egoism?
This is a huge question. Actually, a lot of people are talking about the ending of the mondialization. We were talking about the new way of development, but in a lot of countries, people have seen the lack of production, and you have to wait for example masks to be to bring them from China or from another place, and all those easy things that we can produce we're not produced anymore in a lot of countries. Actually, we have problems with vaccines and with a lot of things. So I'm sure that after this crisis, the World Trade Organization should change the rules, and already a lot of countries get back part of their industry in their countries. So also in Morocco, we have a program to change the importation by the new industries here in Morocco. And my call is this is the good moment to come to Morocco and to invest in Morocco, not only for the inner market, for our market, but also to export and also to have the benefit of all the free trade agreements that Morocco have signed. We signed almost 40 agreements with many countries, especially with the United States of America and also with Europe. So tomorrow with Africa, and we have many bilateral agreements. So as the Israelis did in Jordan, for example, in Jordan, they invest to export to the United States because Jordan have had a free trade agreement with Americans. So we have a huge market to reach, and not only Moroccan or African market, but as I say, we are at the crossroad of part of the world. So Morocco has a good position. Morocco has a lot of technicians, engineers, and people who can make the job with a maybe cheaper price than other places. But also, it's a moving country. It's a country who is doing her best to be one of the best countries in the future. Also, I'm sure that the credit line that we have with Americans, and especially the $3 billion and also the $2 billion dedicated to Africa, it should create certainly maybe Americans or English banks coming to Morocco and to be implemented here and to help people using those credit lines and make it easier to have the financement of the investment that we are waiting for.
It's a good announcement for the future. It's, as you say, a good moment for the cooperation. It's a good moment for peace and prosperity. So, thank you for this optimism, Mr. Toledano. And thank you for our partnership partner, Jerusalem Post. And good luck for the business and stay safe. Thank you very much.
I'm now pleased to welcome Maayan Hoffman, news editor of the Jerusalem Post, who will interview Ohad Arazi, Chief Executive Officer of Zebra Medical Vision, for a discussion of how early detection of chronic disease can be done through artificial intelligence.
Well, Ohad, we are very glad to have you here today at this very unique conference. And I was hoping that we could actually just get started by you telling me a little bit about Zebra itself and how you're using artificial intelligence to screen large populations for chronic disease.
Absolutely, Maayan. So ZebraMed was founded in 2014. We're headquartered in Israel. We're about 95 people strong today. And we're the market leaders in imaging AI with an industry best 7 FDA-cleared solutions across radiology, cardiology, oncology, orthopedics, and bone health. And since day one, ZebraMed has been on a mission to transform patient care by teaching computers to automatically read and diagnose medical imaging studies. I'm sure you know medical imaging is already established as one of the most critical and influential domains in healthcare. Over 3.6 billion imaging scans are taken across the world globally, dealing with nearly every type of condition. And ZebraMed is looking to empower healthcare providers to manage this exploding workload and ever-increasing complexity of medical imaging without compromising the quality of care through the use of AI and machine learning. And one of the things we're extremely passionate about is leveraging that in population health, like you said, to shed a light on chronic diseases, which are typically underreported. 90% of the 3.5 trillion spent annually in the US on healthcare is for patients with chronic conditions. And yet, much of the focus of medical imaging has been on acute conditions, given the fact that radiologists are pressed for time and are often forced to focus only on what matters most. And that's really the role that AI can play, because there's so much more to the data above and beyond the critical finding itself. And we use AI to mine pre-existing data to identify patients who would benefit from interventions that could contribute to their health or to reduce the risk of disease, reduce hospitalizations, improve outcomes through early detection. And that ultimately not only gets better clinical outcomes, but also saves the healthcare system significant costs by identifying diseases that are commonly overlooked or that would benefit from an earlier intervention.
Right, it makes a lot of sense. And you mentioned that $3.5 trillion price tag. So I imagine that this is something in the long term that's going to save trillions and trillions of dollars. Now, you talked about chronic diseases, but let's define those a little bit. What are the diseases that you can detect today? And what are some of the specific benefits connected to those diseases? Give me 1 or 2 examples.
Yeah, if we look at data sets from chest CTs that are performed to diagnose acute conditions, we subsequently analyze those same cases in parallel by an algorithm that can identify a wide variety of chronic conditions. And a few ones maybe I'll touch on are vertebral compression fractures, which are a leading indicator of osteoporosis, coronary calcium scoring, which is an indicator for the risk of cardiovascular disease, emphysema, lung nodules. There's quite a few more. I'll try to bring that to light for you in a moment. Imagine if I get off of a long international flight and I experience chest pain. So the emergency room would send me to do a chest CT, and the radiologist would interpret the exam and focus on confirming or ruling out a diagnosis of pulmonary embolism, which is an acute condition that can emerge on long international flights. But what they would certainly not do in that case is spend more time reviewing the exam to measure the degree of compression in my vertebra as an indicator for osteoporosis, or to quantify the degree of calcium in my coronary arteries as a leading indicator for coronary artery disease. And these are conditions that are not routinely reported on by radiologists, but AI can help. And maybe to your question, I'll double click on osteoporosis for a moment. Nearly half of all women and a quarter of men over the age of 50 will suffer an osteoporotic fracture in their lifetime. The cost of fragility fractures in the US is estimated to be $2 billion annually. This disease is often referred to as the silent killer and is the most common preventable cause of fractures, causing more than 2 million cases of broken bones in the US. And vertebral compression fractures, basically minute compressions in your vertebra, are an indicator that you're developing osteoporosis. But these conditions are typically underreported. Only about 30% of moderate to severe cases of compression fractures are reported on a global average. With AI, we increase detection to over 90%. Wow. And we know that through early intervention, you can have great outcomes in preventing osteoporotic hip fractures in high-risk individuals.
And I imagine that also impacts their quality of life.
Exactly. By treating patients early, through medication, physiotherapy, and lifestyle, it empowers both the physicians and the patients, right? And that can substantially drive down mortality and morbidity.
Amazing. Now, we can't really have a conversation about anything medical nowadays without thinking about the novel coronavirus, about COVID-19. Tell me a little bit about what your company was doing during the crisis and how you think the crisis will influence where we go from here with regards to AI technology.
Yeah, dealing with population health has actually become even more critical since the breakout of COVID, because the entire health system was required to really develop tunnel vision to only deal with what matters most. And as a result, many conditions that are not acute were not getting diagnosed or treated. And in many cases, exams were getting deferred altogether. I liken it to shining a flashlight in a dark room, right? When you're focused on one thing, you can see what's in the spotlight, but you're certainly missing things that are around the edges. And a very good example of this is mammography. With the outbreak of coronavirus, annual mammography tests during lockdown were postponed or canceled globally. And I'll share an amazing data point. Every day from mid-March to mid-May, and that started up again in the fall, an average of 94,000 mammograms were deferred daily. Wow. That means that just in that spring period, almost 6 million patients experienced increasing anxiety waiting to be tested and ran the risk of missing an early detection component of their annual screening as a result of these deferrals. And AI can help solve that. And that same phenomenon is happening again now with the second and with the third waves, as the health system needs to refocus on COVID again. Wow. Generally, I'd say that at a time when personalized medicine is becoming more prevalent, using precise algorithms in the development of AI solutions is really what can be gained to optimize patient outcomes. And if we want precision healthcare for COVID, you need to examine patients more closely. And so we developed an algorithm that does AI analysis of lung CT scans, where you can see early onset of diseases and changes in the diseases over time. So imaging AI allows you to see the progression of COVID pneumonia in the lung and help doctors make a decision on whether or not the patient needs to go to the ICU or needs a ventilator, or if their condition is not an urgent.
That's actually so important, especially because when somebody becomes intubated, we know there's a lot of long-term effects from that as well, not just the action of intubation.
Exactly. I think that, especially in the early days, doctors were often needing to make decisions blind. And this isn't about, classifying a patient as COVID, non-COVID. I think the PCR test has been proven to be very effective, but where imaging AI can help is to help prioritize the patients that need the care the most by indicating to the physicians what is the disease progression of the patient. And therefore, they can make a more informed decision on how to deploy their most valuable resources, right, which is ICU and ventilators and hospital beds.
Amazing. Well, Ohad, thank you so much for being with us today. It was really enlightening, and I hope that we move forward using this technology to better and brighter days as we begin to inoculate here in Israel and around the world and move past COVID-19, but take the benefits of that for tomorrow. Thanks so much.
Excellent, man. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
It's great to welcome back Steve Lindy, the editor of the Jerusalem Report, for an interview with Yuval Steinitz, Israel's Minister of Energy and Water Resources.
Minister Yuval Steinitz, what are Israel's goals in terms of solar energy, and do you expect interest from the UAE and other Gulf states?
First, it's a pleasure to be here with you. And with regard to renewables and solar energy, we made tremendous progress in the last 3 or 4 years. According to the International Energy Organization, we are already number 2 in the world in the production of electricity from solar energy, from the sun, and about 9% of our electricity is already produced, is already solar energy. But we put a new goal to reach 30% renewables. In our case, it's actually 30% solar energy. We don't have renewables. We have renewable solar energy. That's the only renewable we have. To reach 30%, which might put us number one in the world. Using so much solar energy will enable us, together with natural gas, to completely terminate the use of coal and other polluting fuels like diesel or solar in our power stations 5 years from now. And I can tell you that we are very proud to be number one in the world in the speed of reducing and terminating the use of coal. In 2012, more than 60% of our electricity was produced with polluting coal. Today, this year, it will be around 20%, and in 2025, it will be zero. It will be totally replaced with natural gas and solar energy.
In the field of natural gas, what impact has Chevron's entry into the market had on Israel, and do you expect interest in this from the Gulf states?
Look, in the past, the majors and the big energy oil and gas companies were hesitant to invest in Israel. And now, maybe also the Abraham Accords also helped this to happen. With the Chevron, which is currently the biggest oil and gas company in the world, entering Israel, investing in Israel. This is extremely important because I think that Chevron might seriously examine and maybe participate in the ambitious project of the East Med gas pipeline that will enable Israel and Cyprus to export gas directly to Europe through a cross-Mediterranean pipeline. It's going to be the longest and deepest undersea gas pipeline in the world. And also speaking about regional cooperation, actually we already started. Israel is already exporting natural gas to its neighbors, to Egypt and Jordan. But I believe that Chevron, which is so active all over the region and also in Europe, it will help us to promote regional cooperation. And I hope that Chevron will also invest not just in natural gas, but also in Israeli startups and technological companies, because, speaking about renewables, the future of renewables is heavily dependent on research and development and new innovation. Israel has been known to be startup nations for several decades now. Actually, we have more technological startups per capita than any other country in the world. And even in complete numbers, and this is really overwhelming, in little Israel, you have more technological startups than all of the European Union together. If you take Germany and France and Holland and Sweden and Spain and Italy and many other countries, in little Israel, there are more technological startups. And in the last 3 or 4 years, hundreds of new startups began to focus on the field of energy, cybersecurity for the energy sector, energy efficiency, new methods of electricity storage, hydrogen cells, and so on and so forth. We have already, I think, close to 1,000 startups in the field of energy and related issues. And I believe that Chevron might invest in this vibrant innovation thing in Israel as well. And this will be very good, of course.
Israel is also a world leader in water and water desalination. Do you expect interest from the Gulf states in this field?
Yes, but I think that our main contribution can be not necessarily in desalination, but in the recycling of sewage water, of wastewater. Just to give you the figures, Today, we are desalinating more than 80% of our drinking water. So actually, instead of consuming nature, lakes, rivers, the drilling into the ground, we desalinate most of our water from the ocean, from the Mediterranean. What is more significant even, and more unique, that then, after using the water, we recycle close to 95% of our wastewater, of our sewage. We take it, we purify it, we recycle it, and then we use it for farming and agriculture and parks and so on and so forth. I think the second country in the world is Spain with about 30% recycling. And this is extremely important because actually you double the amount of water. First you use them for drinking or households, and then you recycle them for farming and agriculture. But you also avoid many pollution, sewage pollution around the country. And here we are really unique, and of course we are happy to share our experience with the Gulf countries.
You are also an expert on Iran. With a new president entering the White House, how concerned are you about Iran and its violations of the nuclear deal?
I think we are very concerned. And Gulf countries, and actually Europe and the rest of the world should be concerned as well. You know, Iran jumped from 3.7% enrichment level to 20%. Mm-hmm. Many people say, okay, but they have to reach to 90%, so it's only 20% of the way. But this is totally wrong. It's 90% of the way. Why? Because at nature, the uranium you need is 0.7%, the fissile uranium. To get from 0.7% to 20%, you have to double it 30 or 35 times. For 20% to 90%, it's another 3. You have to double it only 3 times more. So actually, you already doubled it by 30 times, and what left is only 3 times. So you actually, when you enrich enough material for 20%, you are already made 90% of the way to fissile material that is needed to nuclear weapons. And therefore, this is very alarming. And the world, hopefully under the new leadership of the new president, President Biden, have to put enormous pressure on Iran to stop and to withdraw from its nuclear program, which is the only aim of their nuclear program is to produce nuclear weapons. This is clear to anybody, to everybody.
Now, you have a close relationship with Joe Biden. Tell us a little bit about that and how you see Israel-U.S. ties developing under his presidency.
Well, I happened to meet President-elect Joe Biden several times in Israel, in Europe, and also at the White House. And he was also always extremely friendly to the state of Israel, extremely committed. You know, in the past, he defined himself when he was a senator, yet as a devoted Zionist. And actually, I think it was in 2014, as a Minister for Strategic Affairs, I was invited by Biden to meet him at the White House following 3 days of talks in the State Department and in Washington to discuss several issues, including, of course, the nuclear deal with Iran, which was negotiated then in 2014. And I raised our reservations about the forthcoming agreement and what is needed in order to fix it. And it was very, very serious and friendly discussion. So I believe that Biden, I'm confident, will remain a friend of Israel, will remain committed to prevent Iran from getting nuclear weapons. Actually, he was committed to this goal together with President Obama just 5-6 years ago. And we will have to create a new dialogue with the new administration in Washington. And hopefully they will put pressure on Iran. And if they are going to a new agreement, it will be a better and improved agreement. Our approach is very clear. It's not enough to freeze the Iranian nuclear program. You have to dismantle it, to roll it back in order to make not just the Middle East, but the entire world safer.
Well, that seems like a good place to end it. Thank you so much for joining us, Cabinet Minister Yuval Steinitz.
You are most welcome.
We're honored to be joined today by Eli Cohen, CEO of Mekorot, Israel's national water company. Eli, it's great to have you with us. Let's talk a little about water technology in Israel. Israel is one of the world leaders in preserving water, desalination of water, retaining its water, and Mekorot is Israel's national water company. We know that Mekorot works along the entire value chain of water. What does that mean exactly?
Good to be here, Yaakov. Actually, Mekorot manages a water network based on 5 different types of water that are all integrated into one water system in a model of a circular economy, which means that we are taking the surface water, the groundwater, the seawater desalination, the effluent water, and the brackish water desalination, mixing and combining all of them to your tap water at home, which is amazing, actually. I think that we are one of the only companies in the world that are combining and integrating this kind of water together.
Now, what's interesting about that is the diversity of where all those different sources of water are coming from, right? You have lots of countries that have their resources of water from lakes or lots of rain. Israel, we don't have a lot of rain. We see that in this current winter season. Not too much rain is coming. But you managed to bring water from a lot of different sources, which is quite unique.
Since the decision of David Ben-Gurion and Levi Eshkol, that Levi Eshkol was the first chairman of Mekorot, and then he was the prime minister of Israel. So this prime minister, Netanyahu, with Steinitz, who is the minister of water, they got a decision to shift the water from the south of Israel to the north of Israel via a new water line, which is the national water line, a new one, which is going to combine with the old one.
And also that fits in with the desalination plants, right? Israel's increasing the number of plants it has?
Yes, so it's like a network. It's like Star Alliance with airlines that you can fly from a place to a place. So we can shift the water from the west to the east, from the north to the south, and from the south to the north. Actually, today we are building a new tunnel, which is 12 kilometers from the mountains of Jerusalem to Jerusalem. And Jerusalem, for the first time, are going to get water that is coming from the Mediterranean Sea.
Wow. So I live in Jerusalem. Will the flavor of my water change, or is it still going to be good tap water?
It's always getting better.
It's always getting better. That's a good answer.
Yeah.
So, this conference is what we're bringing together, us at the Jerusalem Post, together with our colleagues at the Khaleej Times and Emirati newspaper in Dubai. And I know that you're having talks with the Bahrainis and the Emiratis. What's the significance about water technology, about how to maybe cooperate and collaborate in water? What's the significance and where do those talks maybe stand?
First of all, it's fascinating, and we are mostly happy to meet the people, to meet the nations. And first of all, with the fact that it's water and water is essential for us to live, so it's essential that we will speak together, and we are meeting new colleagues, and we are learning and teaching, both of us, the huge potential of water and the crisis that both of us are suffering, since we are located in a place in the world that has a lack of water. And I think that the integrations or the integration of the first meeting that we are facing is going to lead for a huge potential of cooperation together for the benefit of the region. You can imagine one thing, and we have to dream to think that this side of Earth, which is a desert, and is getting more and more desert, it's going to be yellow here in the coming future. We can make it green together.
And is that a common challenge? Are you finding that they're facing similar challenges in the same way they're concerned about similar things to what we're concerned about in terms of our water preservation?
Definitely, and we are sharing the same problems. And it's not only us, it's not only the Gulf, it's also Morocco and Sudan and the countries that didn't sign a peace agreement yet with Israel. So all of us can have benefits out of these kind of agreements.
peace can be made through water. That's pretty incredible. I wanted.
It's more. Yaakov. It's more than that because water has no borders.
That's true.
It's a human that create the borders because water want to go from one place to another.
That's right. And fascinating. Water, what we've all read reports recently over the last few months, especially of different cyber attacks that are taking place all over the world, not necessarily in Israel, not necessarily in the Gulf, but we have seen reports of water facilities being attacked, even here in Israel. What does Mekorot do to ensure that our water service is not, there's no problems, that something doesn't come in and try to stop that water from being contaminated or from being delivered and being pumped into each and every one's home?
So actually, till the last years, we have faced, some kind of a risk of taking care of the physical system that we are operating. The quality of the water, we need to ensure that you are drinking safe water at home, and we are feeding the land with safe water. And add to that, in the coming years, it's the cyber issue. I can tell you that we are safe, and we are one of the best and the safest companies in the world, and especially in Israel. And we know, and we are in a stage today that we can teach, and we are teaching, and we can sell products and technologies that will make the other companies and the facilities in the world, including the Gulf, if they will want it, to make them a safest, system like we are.
Right. One of the things that I know about Mekorot is that you have created also your own incubator for tech companies, right? You're developing technology even in-house and then rolling it out for the industry that can then go global and be sold. These are technologies that you use in Mekorot and inventing, but then opening them up to the global market.
Yeah, so right now I can tell you that 3 years ago we decided that Mekorot, first of all, is going to be a paperless company. So it's not thanks to the corona, it's that today we are not using almost paper. So the majority of our workers are working from home. And it's not only the people like me that we are using pencil and writing in a computer and speaking now, it's also the workers that are working in the field. You can sit today in your house in Haifa, and you can operate an electric machine that is located in the south of Israel in Eilat via your telephone, via your cellular phone, which is also secured.
Wow.
So it's amazing. So everything is going to be in your hand. Not everything, but the majority of our facilities are going to be operated via your hand, and which is amazing. Secondly, I can tell you about two things which can be example for the next generation of water technology. One of them is that we are now trying to reach some kind of a small chip, that you are going to put it in your tap water at home, which is going to broadcast you the quality of the water to your cellular phone.
Wow!
So so you can see on time what is the quality of the water that you are drinking now.
With that little chip.
It's a chip that you are going to to stick in the tap water.
Wow.
Which is amazing. Which I think that it's a startup that Mekorot is running with another Israeli company, a tech company. The second thing is that we are investigating now the potential of building pipes, and we have hundreds of kilometers of pipes with a nanotechnology. So the pipe is going to broadcast you at home his situation, whether he has a lake of water, whether he's not feeling good or he's feeling bad. So you can see it, he's going to be down in the ground, but he's going to speak with you in the coming future, which is amazing.
Which can then pinpoint what needs to be taken care of, what needs to be treated for maintenance purposes.
So it's going to reduce the prices of operating the machines. So the water is going to be cheaper in the coming future. So if we are looking at our area, including the Gulf area, we have a lot of sun. So we can use electricity from the sun. Using electricity from the sun is going to reduce the prices of the electricity of shifting water from a place to a place. So it's going to reduce the water price, the water price. More than that, you can increase the quality of the system and reduce the price of the maintenance.
Right.
So water is not going to be a problem in our region. We just have to believe that we can do it.
That's amazing. Well, Eli Cohen, CEO of Mekorot, Israel's national water company, it's been great to have you with us. Thank you for this fascinating conversation.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Yaakov.
Lahav Harkov, the Jerusalem Post diplomatic correspondent, will join us now for an interview with Aryeh Lightstone, the United States Special Envoy for Economic Normalization in the Middle East.
Thank you so much for joining us at our conference. I think you're sort of uniquely positioned to comment on the topic of the conference since we are at the UAE-Israel Business Summit. Could you tell us a little bit about your position as Special Envoy for Economic Normalization? What does that entail?
First of all, thank you, and thank you for all the hosts for having me here today. It's really an honor and a privilege to have been on the sidelines of some of the most exciting things to happen in 2020, obviously carrying into 2021. I was appointed by Secretary Pompeo as a special envoy for economic normalization just recently, but I've been serving that role de facto since the first phone call on August 13th in between Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, Prime Minister Netanyahu, and obviously President Trump. The moment in that room in the Oval Office was infectious with enthusiasm and excitement. And as with everything involving Jared Kushner and Secretary Pompeo and my original boss and still mentor, Ambassador David Friedman, the question is, what do you do with momentum and excitement? And what we've tried to do, endeavored to do, and to a great degree succeeded in doing is to try to create facts on the ground that will yield excitement for that original Abraham Accord agreement, but also to induce and to excite other countries to join this ever-growing circle of peace and stability in the region.
Well, we were both on that first ever flight from Israel to Abu Dhabi on August 31st of last year. And I remember seeing you in some of those rooms where discussions were being had between the UAE and Israel and the different kinds of cooperation. Could you tell us a little bit about how you were able to sort of facilitate things from moving from a normalization agreement that's written down and that are a bunch of good, positive ideas to really facts on the ground that are, businesses flourishing and all kinds of economic partnerships?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. First of all, a piece of paper is a piece of paper. It's what do you do with that piece of paper that really matters. I will make one comment since you mentioned the flight. You've been on countless flights. I've certainly been on countless flights as well. The first flight I've ever been on that there was a round of applause based upon the taxing announcement. When it was announced that this was going to be the first ever flight from Israel to Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates, people started clapping. Nobody ever claps at the beginning of a flight. On occasion when you land, never when you take off.
And there was in the middle, too, when we flew over Saudi Arabia for the first time. Pretty incredible moment as well.
Yes, there was clapping in the middle as well. There was a lot of clapping on the flight. The enthusiasm was infectious. And I'll tell you, it was well justified because when we landed, we were greeted so warmly, the Americans, the Israelis, the Emiratis. It wasn't a question of what we were going to do. It was just a question of prioritizing the order of how to get it done. And that's really where I think the United States played a critical role. There's an enormous amount to do when two countries who have so much in common, so many mutual interests, so much desire to work together, and they have now this opportunity to again collide together. You want that collision to be as frictionless as humanly possible, and you want it to yield positive experiences. In a normal circumstance, this would have been far easier. But in COVID, lack of flights, lack of embassies, significant health risks each and every time somebody were to journey from one country to the other, lots of restrictions. It became the role of the United States to say, okay, what can we do? In what order can we do it? How do we achieve this? That way we can check that box, and that enables these other doors to open. And I learned more about civil aviation and visas than I ever intended to, and frankly, ever wanted to. Banking agreements and investment agreements. So understanding that without those foundational building blocks, the business that the countries wanted to do together wouldn't be able to be done. Just as an example, a day after the first phone call, I got a call from the space team in the UAE and in Israel saying, let's collaborate on building something to go to space together. And that's a fantastic idea. But maybe first we should figure out whether you can make direct phone calls in between the two countries before you figure out whether you can build a space shuttle that will go to the moon together, or to Mars, actually, in that case. So the enthusiasm, the excitement was there. Sometimes you have to slow down and just put the building blocks in that build the foundation for that success.
So what is an example of a project between Israel and the UAE that you're especially excited about?
We can go straight to space. I found it very interesting that over the last 3 to 4 years, growing up, I heard a lot about space, and then there was about a 25-year gap where it was something you saw a movie about, but you didn't hear commonly discussed in the newspapers. Israel with their Space IL launch, and the UAE with I believe called the Hope, their launch as well within the last 8-9 months, demonstrated 2 things that I think are very profound. If you look at the Middle East, and as Jared Kushner said just 10 days ago in Jerusalem, people should stop looking at the Middle East as a source of problems, but rather as a source of solutions. If you look at Israel on one end and the UAE on the other end, over the last 75 years, it's difficult to find countries that have done more to grant stability to their part of their region and success to their inhabitants and to their citizens. And when you look at their ability to combine those powers together and to go ahead and to grow in that way, it's truly exciting. So you've got space on one end, but on the other end is just plain and simple tourism. If you look at 2020, it is impossible to ever fill the hotel rooms that sat empty or sell the falafel that stayed in the stand. It'll never grow again. You can't sell a bed that wasn't slept in. But if you're going to open up a brand new market that has never been tapped, it's the promise of 2021 and beyond that gives hope to those businesses, those small businesses that have suffered tremendously this year. And each and every one of them, to a person, he and she have told me, if I can make it to 2021, 2022, we're going to flourish like we've never flourished before, because the opening of a brand new market that they never anticipated. It wasn't in any of the business plans, and it wasn't calculated in any of the both equity or debt opportunities what these brand new markets would bring for the small business owners. So you've got space on one end, which is unbelievable, and on the other end, you've got the person who owns the falafel store or drives the cab, equally excited about 2021 and 2022. And you know you've done something right when both of those cohorts are enthusiastic.
Well, that does sound very exciting. I wanted to ask you about a different country. I understand you were very instrumental in getting normalization between Israel and Sudan off the ground. Now, that's going to be a very different kind of relationship because Sudan is, of course, in a dire economic straits that it is trying to dig itself out of. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about what you expect from that relationship.
Yeah, so I'll tell you a couple different things. With the leadership of Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, the President Jared Kushner and Prime Minister Netanyahu, the message was clear from every hall of power. Go big and go quick. And what that means is once you've committed to change a region for the better, that change should not be isolated to 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 countries. What we're creating should be so big and so bold and so changing that other people are going to want to grab onto that. And that's what we had with Sudan. We're wishing Sudan an enormous amount of luck as they change their future. We'll help them in the U.S. I know Israel is standing by to help them, but uniquely enough, the UAE and Bahrain are standing by to help as well. And Sudan is going to be a testament to the success of the Abraham Accords, not because one country, ours, the superpower, has the ability to do it on our own, but we need local partners. And the United Arab Emirates, the State of Israel, the Kingdom of Bahrain, and others are going to be invested in the success of Sudan. And here's the advantage to Sudan. It's really a blank slate. The transitional government is going to merge into a full-time, permanent, hopefully democratic government. It's going to give opportunities for their citizens, and it's going to create a safer anchor to that part of the region. And that's going to make everybody more safe and more prosperous. And I know that here's business. If you and I are on the opposite side of a negotiating table and maybe there's some friction or maybe we're not positive where the win is, but we look at a third target business that we can look at together where it's very clear what I bring to the table and it's very clear what you bring to the table, oftentimes that's an easier conversation. And so I see Sudan as an opportunity for all of the other Abraham Accord countries to rally around, invest in their success. The economic opportunities are very significant, and the value of Sudan having a stable, meaningful, prosperous economy, the ripple effect that will have on that component of Africa is immeasurable from an investment perspective.
Well, on that hopeful note, we need to wrap up. So thank you again. Thank you so much for all the help in getting these things done for Israel and for the region, and for being here at the conference.
Lav, thank you so much for always spending time with me. I'll just tell you, you say it's for Israel, it's for the region. It's not, it's for the United States. How many times have people looked at from the United States perspective and said the Middle East is a source of challenge? This administration, again, led by Ambassador Friedman, Jared Kushner, Secretary Pompeo, and Avi Berkowitz, of course, have taken a different approach. And in this approach, they've said, look at what can be positive that can come out of here. And when you look at 2020, I think it's going to be remembered for COVID, but it's also going to be remembered for the Abraham Accords. And it's been a very significant honor to play a small role in figuring out how this region can be the source of hope and opportunity for the entire world instead of a source of challenge and frustration. So thank you for always giving us a chance, and thanks for supporting this in a big way.
Thank you.
This has been great. I'd like to thank Vinay Kamath, the editor of the Khaleej Time, and the rest of my friends over at the newspaper. I want to thank our speakers and our sponsors. And stay tuned. In February, we continue with a live conference together with the Khaleej Times in Dubai. For now, to wrap us up, I'd like to ask my colleague Poonam Chawla, head of KT Engage Events and Conferences, to close up today's broadcast. Poonam?
Thank you, Yaqub. Dear ladies and gentlemen, finally we draw down the curtain on this fabulous initiative of Khaleej Times and Jerusalem Post. Thanks to the efforts all around, we have been able to generate a fantastic conversation. I would like to extend our warmest thanks to all our speakers and panelists who made this possible. The Abraham Accords, signed in September 2020, was an important moment for the Middle East. The agreement saw an Arab nation normalizing relations with Israel for the first time since 1994. The UAE-Israel Peace and Prosperity Roundtable did a deep dive and explored the contours of new paradigm in the Middle East. Not only has the agreement created a new political discourse, it has also laid the foundations for a strong economic bridge between the two countries. It will create an unprecedented force multiplier, something that will tap the immense potential of the region. The roundtable conversations have flagged some of the key sectors that stand to gain immediately. The financial services sector will be pivotal in deepening the economic ties between Israel and the UAE. The banking accords already signed will allow entities to work together to promote relationships with corporations and financial institutions in Israel and the UAE. It will also drive innovation in two of the Gulf's most advanced financial centers. As pointed by His Excellency Mr. Hamad Bouamim, President and the CEO of Dubai Chamber, the bilateral agreement will benefit both the public and the private sector across the Middle East region by opening the door for a cross-border business collaborations. The agreement is part of a broader engagement between the UAE and the Israel to further peace, dialogue and stability, and at the same time promote sustainable development by identifying synergies. Similarly, the tech sector has been identified as an important investment destination. Agreements are being linked to enable knowledge sharing, talent development, and greater innovation between the two of the future-centric countries in the world. His Excellency Dr. Tani L Zuhairi has drawn our attention to how a deepening economic relationship between the two countries will stimulate the regional trade. The UAE-Israel Peace and Prosperity Roundtable sets the stage to an on-ground event in Dubai, UAE. This list will discuss a longer list of potentially lucrative, mutually beneficial business opportunities in trade, including vaccines, automotive, banking, and much more. We at Khaleej Times are honored to have been the opportunity to play the role of a catalyst. Thank you again, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us today, and we look forward to your presence in February 2021. Thank you.